Chapter 130. The mutant gene bank contained the genetic samples of almost all the mutants under the control of the human government. In the mutant gene bank, in this underground base that was 40 kilometers deep into the Earth's mantle, Chun-Ong saw, wrapped in magma and blazing radiation, that crystal-like secret room, this so-called mutated gene bank. A man with 6 wings. Under his ribs, the white wings were arranged in a trapezoid shape. The light on the wings was as bright as the flames of the sun. The seraphim was created by Warren Washington. It originated from his child. It was a miraculous mutant gene created by the angel species. The seraphim was Sephiroth. A long time ago, humans realized that their most powerful weapon technology had become their biggest weakness in the face of the apocalypse. Skynet was everywhere. Where there was technology, there would be Skynet's technology. In this world, more than 80% of man-made materials were made of Skynet's intelligent atoms. The technological civilization created by humans was almost defenseless against Skynet. Only in this state of destruction could this fragile balance be maintained. However, the creativity of humans was endless. They soon discovered a loophole in the telepathic communication. It was impossible for humans to know other people other than themselves. In other words, every human could only confirm their own existence. Everything else came from the perception of the outside world. With more than 2 orders of magnitude of information, one would be able to control this perception ability. This was the famous brain in a jar. It was also the first large-scale experiment conducted by the United States after the wall-facing project was launched. The experiment showed that intelligent creatures, or rather, living creatures, had no ability to distinguish information that exceeded their knowledge by more than 2 orders of magnitude. Their science, everything they explored in the world, their perception of the world, their feelings and love were restrained and controlled. In the supercomputer that carried out information simulation, the human brain of the old era was immersed in the senses and logic created by the computer. The experimenters could arbitrarily modify the common sense, cognition, and even everything of the experimenter. A researcher who opposed this extreme experiment. By modifying the physical constants of the virtual world, a warning and reminder was sent to the humans in that world. However, something even more terrifying happened. The researcher who discovered the error easily corrected this unknown error. Then, the real world that fell into panic carried out extreme load experiments on the virtual world. However, the virtual world did not make any effort to break through the information prison. Only a prophecy was left. They were God. Whether it was a revelation of the truth or a devastating disaster. Whether it was the explosion of technology in the virtual world, or was it humanity's final struggle in the information control of the virtual world. More than 50,000 outstanding scientists and workers from all over the world were struggling in the virtual world. But in the end, even the worst programmer from the outside world had crushed all of their efforts. In the virtual world, humans were faced with the most outstanding members of their own kind. They were the gods of the virtual world. No matter how they broke logic, how they revealed the truth, or how they broke the rules, they could easily change the information in the virtual world. The resistance in the virtual world was as powerless as if they were in another dimension. They were like humans in the real world, characters in novels, NPCs in the game. Their knowledge, their feelings, and the meaning of their existence were all in the real world. It was pointless. Unable to withstand such a blow, the virtual world began to self-destruct on a large scale. Then, it was restarted by pressing the enter button in the real world. Living a life worse than death, losing control of one's own body, and being unable to control one's own existence was a great horror. Finally, scientists came up with the conclusion of the brain in a vat experiment. The human consciousness in the virtual world was an existence of a lower dimension compared to the real world. The real world had finally created a 2-dimensional world. It was not a 3-dimensional world, but a completely controlled virtual world, a world that existed in 0 and 1. A virtual world that was controlled by cognition, its existence was modified, it could not be sensed, it could not be pursued, and even the laws of physics could be the same as the real world. Everything they did was meaningless. The truth they pursued was actually the rules of the game controlled by humans. The free will they struggled to prove the meaning of their existence was just information instilled by humans in the real world. This experiment proved a relative law of the Earth civilization, the existence of 2 orders of magnitude difference in information after cognitive coverage, did not have the ability to distinguish between virtual and reality. And this cognitive coverage and information control could create a dimensional reduction attack. This was the ultimate horror of humans. The dimensional reduction attack that they could not escape from, the long-lost horror of being dominated, controlled, and created. And according to the world's largest computer, the information level gap between Skynet and humans was as high as 1.8 orders of magnitude. In 2 months and at least 2 weeks, it would lead to a sudden dimensional change between humans and Skynet. At that time, Skynet would become the natural law of human civilization, and Apocalypse would become God. At that time, with just a thought from Apocalypse, human civilization would not be able to distinguish between virtual and reality, and would not be able to escape the control of Skynet's information input. Human society would become a huge virtual world, and human civilization would become the NPC of Apocalypse, the background setting of the game. They would be knocked down from the world of the same dimension as Apocalypse. From then on, they would be reduced to a relatively low-dimensional species. This world would no longer have any hope. Civilization freedom, countdown of 1 month and 25 days, wall-facing plan activated. Goal: at all costs, stop Skynet's information control of human civilization, prevent a possible dimensional reduction attack. For cognitive freedom, for fate not to be bound, humans all over the world, unite. Cut off the shackles and fight for freedom. This was the reason for the prophet's sacrifice. It was also the reason why all the countries in the world, which had countless contradictions and hated each other, worked together. They even risked creating another uncontrollable civilization to carry out the craziest and most terrifying plan. Humans wanted to take back their fate from the hands of God. At this moment, Chen Ong stood in front of the mutant gene, Quzapharoth. There were still 2 weeks and 2 days, 5 hours, 8 minutes, and 36 seconds until the information on Skynet changed and the dimension descended. Dr. Bolivar, one of the suspects of the wall-facing plan, faced with Apocalypse, carried out a part of his wall-facing plan. Dr. Apocalypse, do you see that existence? It's holy, it's glorious, it's also what that old guy Warren thinks is the ultimate fantasy of mankind, a perfect biological angel. According to my competitor, Dr. Warren Washington, it's a perfect creature, the incarnation of divinity, the side of his son, God. He requested to implant the gene bank that you, Dr. Apocalypse, are determined to obtain into the body of this perfect creature, arranging the hundreds of millions of genetic codes into divine genes and hiding them at the end of his chromosomes, in the lonely, one and only. This is also the only way to avoid the infiltration of Skynet technology, and also to force you to face his ultimate creation, the only completed Final Fantasy plan, Sephiroth. You seem to want me to destroy this creation. Chen Ong tilted his head and looked at Bolivar. Of course, there's only one person facing the wall. None of us know who the real person is, and who is a part of his plan. We can't recognize anything other than our own consciousness. Even I am not sure if I am the wall-facing person, the prophet, or Warren, but I know a way. A failed wall-facing person is no longer a wall-facing person. So, I may not be the first wall-facing person, but I will definitely be the last one. Moreover, his perfect creature plan. Bolivar curled his lips in disdain. It is a joke. What he is trying to create and control is a creature with perfection as its goal. If it is controlled by an extremely imperfect species like humans, then this creature will definitely not be perfect. We are creating God, a perfect existence. He must be noble, must be sacred, must be looked at directly by humans, must be an existence of freedom. All attempts to control him are blasphemy against this plan. So you have betrayed us. Chenong laughed. There is no betrayal between wall-facing people. We can do whatever we want without being bound by human morals, laws, and everything else. We are free, Bolivar said indifferently. What you said is very interesting, especially the part about the perfect creature. If I didn't hear wrong, you're creating such a creature, Chenong said as he looked at the dazzling wings on Sephiroth's back. It is a sentinel robot, right? Yes, Bolivar said in a daze. But I did not create him. I found him in the truth. I brushed away the dust of time from his face and awakened him from his old age to become sacred. He is perfect, the existence of absolute truth, the Supreme Lord. Humans can call him a sentinel robot, but one day they will kneel on the ground and call him God, Yahweh, God. There is no such thing as God in this world. Humans do not have to lower their heads to anything that exists. Even if it is an incomprehensible existence, even if it is an existence that controls fate, so what? Chenong said slowly. Look to the humans in the virtual world. Are the humans in the real world holy? Humans can only fully recognize themselves. Apart from that, there is no holiness, because they might just be an author with messy logic, a programmer who only knows how to press the enter key. Those who call themselves holy, those who have great powers, are just a little higher than us, which is why worshipping them as holy is meaningless. There is no existence. Born noble, Chenong walked in front of Bolivar. This man, who was now a demon of the humans and might become the god of the humans in the future, said resolutely in Bolivar's ear, because they will all be beaten to the ground. Chapter 131. His blue pupils were as calm as the deep ocean. Thud. Professor Bolivar's heart was filled with wariness and disgust towards such a gaze. It wasn't the arrogance of someone who thought highly of himself, nor was it the disregard for plants and rocks. In fact, it couldn't even be said to be cold. It was a gaze filled with emotions and divinity. What Dr. Bolivar hated the most was this incomprehensible complexity, like a beast staring at humanity. This disgust even affected his emotions. Sephiroth spread the wings on his back, and a blinding light radiated from the wings. Countless bright, sun-like wings spread out layer by layer behind him like a phantom. It was holy, it was bright, it was like a god, like an angel. It was the only thing that could be described as holy, and it was also the crystallization of the divinity of human civilization. If Bolivar's perfect creature was an evolved monster that walked out of the universe and was the result of natural selection in the universe, then Sephiroth was a perfect existence that walked out of human imagination. Through the electronic eyes of the Sentinel robot, the person who could truly decide the fate of human beings on this planet was watching this war. This was also the first direct confrontation between the wall-facing plan and Skynet. The confrontation between the creation of the Final Fantasy plan and the apocalypse would largely determine the fate of human beings. A light quantum entangled life form. Chenong stared at the dazzling radiance. He saw the ocean of photons in the void surging between the particle state and the wave state, changing and transforming. The photons emitted from the sun surged in the void like an ocean. The waves in the ocean of energy collapsed into the particle state behind Sephiroth and spread out like a pair of radiant wings. Endless wings, endless light, deep in the Earth's core. Sephiroth was like a second sun. Mr. Apocalypse, this is the power of human beings. A three-dimensional light projection stood next to Bolivar. It was a well-dressed middle-aged man. It was hard to imagine just by looking at his appearance. This ordinary-looking man was one of the most powerful people in the United States. He controlled the third-largest financial group in the United States, Warren Washington. We believe in human intelligence, just like how you can create Skynet. Just like creating xenogeneics, we can create miracles of life. Warren walked around Bolivar and stood in front of Chun-Ong. Among the mutants, there is no lack of proof that a great will is watching over us. In the genes of my child, Angel, on the face of the Blue Devil, in the X chromosome of the Demoness, this will was engraved with its secrets. This is a sacred whisper that only prophets can hear. Warren looked at the dazzling light. There are many tattoos on the Blue Devil's body. Ordinary humans can't even bear the information contained in these tattoos. Legend has it that this is the mark of the Archangel Michael for the sins of humanity. After we discovered the apocalypse of the dimensional reduction crisis, the prophet looked directly at his tattoos. Guess what we found inside? Warren looked into Chun-Ang's eyes. He didn't want Chun-Ong to answer. After receiving a smile from Chun-Ong, he continued. The prophet saw you. She saw the apocalypse, the sins of humanity, the salvation of humanity. You are an angel. The apocalypse, we finally know your origin. You are divine. You are the apocalypse. At that time, we knew that only the divine can fight against the divine. So, the prophet burned herself and returned to the sky. She existed in the past and the future at the same time. She ascended to the divine. This was our first resistance against you, and the only time we succeeded in touching your existence. And I, following the revelation of the Great Will, listened to its whisper, and used genetic engineering to create this perfect body. Bolivar's face was pale, and he said word by word, Final Fantasy. Sephiroth. That's right. Perfect creatures don't exist, and they are not something humans can touch. Bolivar, you've gone in the wrong direction from the beginning. We created this body and waited for a higher, greater existence to descend upon it. We waited for that moment, the whisper of the Great Will, and gave it a soul and a true name. At that moment, in the ocean of light, a name echoed, Sephiroth. Chun-Ang's expression was very strange. It seemed like he wanted to laugh, but at the same time, he sighed. He interrupted Warren's intoxication and asked directly, Do you know why the tattoos on the Blue Devil's body changed? A trace of madness appeared on Warren's face. It's the only will, the great existence, its whisper, its revelation. No. Chun-Ong interrupted him, and he shook his head with a sigh. If we ignore the things about faith and judge from the current information, there is only one person who can do this. Warren turned around and looked at Chun-Ong blankly. Bolivar gasped and took a few steps back, away from Warren. The people who were watching through the Sentinel robots looked at each other, until the professor came out from behind them in a wheelchair. Looking at Chun-Ang's calm expression on the light screen, the professor sighed. Only the apocalypse itself can do this. Ignoring Warren's increasingly pale face, Chun-Ong continued, Of course it's me. I'm the one who engraved the Final Fantasy plan, the one who designed the mutant gene bank, the one who created the energy creature, photon life, and the one who left the technology to cultivate the energy gene information. The creation of Sephiroth was very difficult, and you contributed a lot. You were able to realize the outline of the plan I left behind. To be honest, you're amazing, and so are humans. In the end, among the 16,842 test subjects, one of them had the complete genetic information of the Angel variant. In words that are easy for everyone to understand, even at the farthest distance in the universe, two quantum states can superimpose and be related. Therefore, I have an interesting idea. If the detection of consciousness caused the collapse of the quantum wave function, and the observer decided the state of the quantum state, then after deceiving the observer, can we interfere with the quantum causality determinism? In other words, if it's the consciousness that interferes with the quantum, then can you change reality, just like the delay experiment, and change the results of the past? The experiment actually succeeded, and human consciousness changed reality. You think that Sephiroth is an angel, and that's why he exists in such an impossible form. What is he? Bolivar asked in shock. He had lost the composure of a scientist, and his hands that were clenched so tightly that they were ghastly pale. Somewhere on Earth, the human leaders who were watching the monitor also fell into silence. He's the sun, and the core of the sun is undergoing nuclear fusion all the time. Most of the sun itself is quantized, which means that there's a large quantum probability cloud around the high-energy reaction of the star, which is the result of high-energy quantum dispersion caused by the evaporation of the star all the time. Earth is in the star probability cloud of the sun. You've observed him. The sun's probability cloud. I made you think that he's alive. Your observation caused the probability cloud to collapse, and the sun evaporated high-energy quantum all the time, so the probability cloud was in a state of collapse but not collapse. This is him, the son of the sun, Sephiroth, another form of the sun. Chen-Ong stared at the ocean of light behind Sephiroth, the huge quantum probability cloud that spread over a range of several light-years. Endless wings spread from Sephiroth's back and spread into the void, connecting with the ocean of light. It spread into the void and connected with the sea of light. This was the quantum form of the sun, Agent Sephiroth. Stars and humans, the greatest and the smallest. Everyone present, from Bolivar to Warren Washington, as well as the human leaders who were hiding behind the screen and watching, were all shocked by Chen-Ong's crazy plan. Stuffing a part of a star into a human's body was such an arrogant and grand idea. Bolivar trembled, wanting to touch this dazzling great existence. He had to admit that Sephiroth, who had the soul of the sun, was a real angel. He was the son of the sun, and he was Michael. Humans tried to create angels, and they gave him the body of an angel and the most perfect mutant genes, but this was only a mutant. Chen-Ong, on the other hand, stuffed the sun's soul into this body. Thus they succeeded. But at this moment, no one was in a good mood. What was Chen-Ong going to do? What was he going to do to the sun? Humans didn't know to what extent Sephiroth could affect the sun. They were anxious, terrified, confused, and trembling. They only saw a green brilliance blossoming from Sephiroth's body. Chen-Ong seemed to be planning something. With Sephiroth, the existence in the state of quantum collapse, he could already reach into the quantum world and affect another state of stars and planet. Just as he had planned for a long time, he extracted the mutant gene library from Sephiroth's body. Countless complex ghost substances in the state of quantum collapse fused into a beautiful double helix, which was the projection of the information gene. The professor stared at Chen-Ong on the screen, his hands trembling. He held the wheelchair and wanted to leave, but he saw the light projected by the light screen jump regularly. Professor! The light that formed the Morse code wrote. The professor thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He turned around again and stared at the line of light. Sure enough, the light continued to tremble. Professor, I am a prophet. I will communicate with you in the future. Don't get excited and don't alarm others. The apocalypse interferes with me too much. I can no longer interfere with this world, so I can only communicate with you like this. Listen, I know what happened there, and I also know about the arrival of the Son of the Sun, but your biggest threat is not him. Pay attention to what the apocalypse is doing now. You can't stop all this from happening, but you must understand that the apocalypse is creating a kind of life in a quantum state. Different from the Son of the Sun, this is a kind of life that can reproduce and is a real life. Although it only has some simple information genes, it will soon mature in Sephiroth's body. That is a kind of quantum ghost virus. It can infect large planets and small viruses. It is a parasitic quantum virus on planet. You must be vigilant. The light fluctuated violently. You must be vigilant. Be careful of Genofa, the plague messenger, be careful of cloning. The information of the light suddenly stopped, and the flickering light also calmed down. The professor looked up and saw Chen-Ang's eyes staring at the screen. He knew that Chen-Ong was looking at him. He could feel that Chun-Eng's eyes were focused on him. In Chun-Eng's hand, the quantum double helix had stabilized and disappeared into Sephiroth's body. In the quantum cloud of probability that the professor could not see, a green brilliance spread out. A simple double helix structure began to rapidly become complex and perfect in the quantum state. It began to constantly replicate and purify. With Sephiroth as the main body, a powerful consciousness began to form. It was Sephiroth and the virus itself. The quantum cloud of probability on Earth, or Earth in a quantum state, Gaia. They were rapidly infected by this virus, and this infection spread to any life on Earth, even to inanimate existences. The professor felt a slight tingling in his right arm. He saw a little green light flashing under his skin. Then, it disappeared like an illusion. The light on the ground danced again. "Hello, Professor. I am Genophar." To be continued. Chapter 132. There was a kind of life that was enslaved from the day it was born. There was a kind of life that was not expected by its creator. It went against nature and ethics. A cursed life. A despised life. A life that was incomplete, not expected, without blessings, emotions, love, and family. A life that was trampled on, used, and only had value like a tool, those living tools, those humans without self-awareness. Sephiroth vaguely felt his body. It was not one, but 16,842 bodies floating in the nutrient solution. He did not know what kind of existence he was. However, he could feel the muddled consciousnesses in those different bodies. They were like immature, fragile consciousnesses that were still wet behind the ears. There was also his own existence that was above them. It was a very strange feeling. The 16,842 consciousnesses were both him and not him at the same time. In other words, they were only him when they were gathered together. He watched as they interacted, played around, and embraced each other as if they were one in the sea of consciousness. He took the occasional chance to peek into the world beyond the nutrient solution and rejoiced because of a discovery that was not part of his memory implantation. In the monotonous and boring petri dish, these newborn consciousnesses peeped at the outside world curiously. However, they were not the life that was expected. There was no emotion, only use. There was no communication, only orders. There was no right to life, only the value of a tool. There was no need for an imperfect experimental body to exist. There was no value in an unusable tool. Sephiroth's life was only given one meaning of existence, to become the successful experimental body, the only and the best one. And the only fate of those eliminated tools was to be recycled. His body melted bit by bit in the solution. He did not even have time to open his eyes. There was regret, loneliness, and fear. This was Sephiroth's memory. It was also the memory of most clones. Clones driving mobile armors in Moscow, clones working hard in New York, Mumbai, Egypt, and the Middle East. Clones created for entertainment purposes. There were 8 billion clones in the world. Most of them worked in positions that humans disdained. They were tools to liberate human productivity. The organs of the clones were removed from their bodies. The military-grade clones slaughtered each other on the most difficult battlefield of death. Entertainment clones to be abused, killed, and enjoyed. The evil side of humanity. It poured out incisively on these artificial lifeforms with human faces. Most of them only had a lifespan of 3 years to 3 months. They had serious genetic diseases, so they could be consumed and replenished at any time. Silent tears slid down from Sephiroth's eyes. The gray memories of these artificial lives, the memories of being dominated by the evil thoughts of human beings, made his wings tremble. Only the strongest emotions could shape a life's soul. Genova invaded the lives on this planet. It followed the rhythm of the planet and quietly hid in the bodies of most of the lives. It even spread in the quantum probability cloud of the planet, causing the planet to be infected with the virus. The weak consciousness of the virus was not enough to infect human consciousness, but for the clones whose emotions were blank. The virus was unhindered. Green light flickered on the clones' right hands. Genova started to weave their genes and repair their crudely built bodies. Under Genova's control, the genes that were riddled with holes were reorganized and renewed. There was a brilliant wing on the right side of Sephiroth's body. It slowly unfurled from under his skin. The seven-winged angel descended from the sky. The wings were brighter than the sun, and the darkness was deeper than the abyss. Below the three pairs of light wings, there was a dark black wing. The other brilliant black wing stretched out from under Sephiroth's ribs. At this moment, a black wing tattoo appeared under the ribs of all the clones in the world. What did I create? Warren staggered 2 steps back and looked at the one-winged angel, whose eyes were gradually regaining color. Chen-Ong turned around and smiled. Maybe it's an angel, or maybe it's a devil. Who knows? Destroy it. The command of the Human Command Center appeared in Bolivar's ears. The silver-white metal body glowed with a dense brilliance. The sentinel robot that reappeared in front of Chen-Ong had long lost its original form and material. It was covered by a metal that couldn't be analyzed at all. It didn't look like an AI, but more like a life. It couldn't be infiltrated, scanned, or analyzed by a heavenly king. This was the ultimate weapon of mankind. Markham's so beautiful. Bolivar couldn't help but show off his most outstanding work. He firmly believed that the perfect creation from his hands would surpass all life. Apocalypse, do you see it? This is my creation. Human creativity isn't enough to create a perfect creature, so we created it. The child of the sun is indeed the limit that humans can reach, but you're still not crazy enough and bold enough. You're still trying to control your creation, to control a perfect existence. This is your biggest weakness. It is impossible to create the most perfect work of art with shackles on the feet and hand. Only by abandoning all the shackles and all the factors that may cause obstacles and dedicating everything to the creation of a perfect existence can it be possible. You'll lose, Apocalypse. When you try to use your intelligence to control your creation, you will inevitably lose to me. Sentinels are free and extreme. They don't need to abide by anything, nor do they need any principles or criteria. The purpose of their birth is to be perfect. Chen-Ong shook his head. It's a very mysterious extraterrestrial life form. Regeneration, evolution, absorption, and replication are also very powerful abilities. It has an almost immortal vitality and regenerative ability. It constantly evolves, adapts to the enemy's attacks, and even learns from them. In theory, it's invincible and perfect. It can absorb and replicate the enemy's abilities. The stronger the enemy, the stronger it can become. It'll always be stronger than the enemy. But in theory, it's still theory. There's nothing that can't be understood, and no attribute is absolute. I'm very curious. Bolivar, do you know the deep reason behind the evolution of this life form? Have you studied and understood their abilities? Bolivar shook his head and sneered. It's absolute and perfect. Humans can't understand it. The moment it discovered you, it was already stronger than you. The results of the previous 36,000 experiments proved this point. You're stronger than it, but the moment it discovered you, the outcome was already decided. There's no such thing as an absolute attribute. The foundation of this world is the laws of science, not a setting or a concept. There's no such thing as an absolute concept in the universe. The attributes of everything are concepts given by humans or other intelligent life forms. Concepts can only ever be close to the truth. Chen-Ong said slowly, if you generalize the attributes and concepts of this life form as its essence, then your failure is destined. So, can you tell me the more scientific nature of this life form? How is regeneration and evolution achieved? What kind of ability is absorption and replication? Don't be like a monkey waving a big stick. If you treat this extraterrestrial life form as an accumulation of concepts, then I'll be too disappointed. Chernong walked past the Sentinel robots, but they didn't react. Chernong whispered into Bolivar's ear, "Just like the scanning and replication ability, the Sentinel robots can become stronger than the enemy the moment they see it." The scanning technology from the previous versions of the Sentinel robots and the evolution ability of the extraterrestrial lifeforms seem to have formed this concept. But there's a very simple question that I need to ask you. Bolivar, how many generations is Skynet's information technology more advanced than Earth's technology? Bolivar stood trembling on the spot and shook his head. Impossible. Why hasn't it changed? Why? It's 1.8 orders of magnitude higher. This means that human civilization can't understand most of Skynet's technology and information, and it's the same for the scanning technology. The overwhelming control of information has created a bug. How can an incomprehensible information evolve into a corresponding ability? Chen Ong looked at the trembling Bolivar, who was drenched in sweat, and sighed. You've designed a piece of trash, at least to Skynet. You can guess, will Skynet crack the secrets of the extraterrestrial lifeform first, or will the extraterrestrial lifeform evolve to counter Skynet's ability first? The speed of evolution is usually not as fast as scientific analysis, right? After saying that, Chen Ong saw Bolivar's disheartened expression. In the air, Sephiroth's wings shone with the radiance of the sun and swept over the Sentinel robot. The Sentinel robot's body was easily torn apart like a rag. The incomprehensible attack caused the Sentinel robot to turn into a disordered probability cloud at the quantum level, and then it collapsed into a pile of scrap iron. More than 1 billion clones around the world recovered from the pain. They opened their eyes in a daze. For the first time, they used their own souls to touch the world. The reconstructed genes shattered the soul shackles set by humans and broke the control at the genetic level. The 1 billion tools now had their own will. From factories to residential areas, from military to scientific research institutions, the clones were liberated. The power of the plague appeared for the first time in this world. It wasn't destruction, but reconstruction. It gave a race free will, and it recreated the world of clones. This was the plague of the planet, and it was also the evolution of life. To be continued. Chapter 133. Genova has already spread, Professor. We're powerless to stop this from happening. Soon, this quantum virus will infect the entire planet, all humans, clones, and Earth. The light and shadow in front of the professor flickered again. The prophet warned him from a higher latitude. Genova will choose its own kin. It will exist in the form of a plague and reside on the planet. The spring of life, which is the planet's biological quantum probability cloud, will be contaminated. Genova will exert influence on the living creatures on the planet. When it was still weak, it chose clones as its dependents. Under the influence of Genova's power, the clones will repair the genetic defects left behind during the artificial creation. They will be free and no longer be controlled by humans. Genova will become the trinity of the clone civilization, the planet's plague, and Sephiroth. The professor said solemnly, "What can we do? We can't make a decisive impact in such a process." "You can do it, Professor." In order to resist Genova's invasion, there were only 3 ways to do it. Humans have already been infected by Genova. If nothing goes wrong, we will return to the planet's river of life and be harvested by this virus. Genova's will replace the human's will. As long as the human's will is not united, this trend will never be reversed. We need you, Professor. We need your psionic ability to build a mind ocean for humans to communicate with their minds and remove the mental barriers. Only then will Genova not be able to control humans. Mind ocean? Prophet, I won't violate the free will of individuals, nor will I force them to make choices that are not voluntary. Mind network, mind control, is an extreme violation. I won't do that, the professor rejected. You didn't create the mind ocean, Professor. We just hope that you can rediscover it. It has always existed in a deeper layer of our subconscious, the collective subconscious shared by all humans. The surface consciousness is like a glacier on the surface of the sea. The subconscious is the part under the water, and the collective subconscious is the ocean surrounding the glacier. We hope that you can touch this ocean and solidify a part of the collective subconscious into the collective surface consciousness, merging humans into the mind ocean and awakening the collective consciousness of humans to resist Genova's invasion. Is there any other plan? The professor frowned and did not agree directly. The Soviet Union's seclusion plan can effectively resist the betrayal of the clone. Yuri will wage a war against the rebels on the mental level. He wanted the clones to return to human civilization. But Magneto also wants to use this opportunity to let some clones with mutant genes accept his ideas and identify as mutants. If Magneto succeeds, the world will be divided. The number of mutant clones is as high as 2 billion. After the mutants have the power to compete with humans, the division of human civilization is imminent. The combative police must stop his wall-breaking plan. The combat police can depart now. We are old rivals. This time, the professor did not refuse and agreed. Sephiroth will definitely return to the underground base of the Final Fantasy project. We plan to kill him there. In the underground base of Yellowstone Park, Chen-Ong stood at the top of the mountain and looked down at the world. Sephiroth folded his wings and slowly landed beside him. In front of Chen-Ong, the professor's mental projection seemed a little thin and weak, but even though the professor's mental state seemed to be very bad, but he was still like a warrior, his spine straight. To be honest, I'm quite surprised by your appearance, Chen-Ong said to the professor. Are you surprised by the existence that can cover the fifth dimension? Has my choice crossed the river of time? The professor smiled. He was even in the mood to make a joke. My choice should have been expected by you. After all, my principles are very simple, and it is not difficult to make a judgment based on them. The principle may be simple, but it is not simple at all to adhere to it. Just like now, carrying the whole world on your shoulders, using everything you have to persist in the face of ridicule, abuse, and even against conscience and moral standards, sacrificing your own position. This is definitely not a simple thing. It's not as difficult as you think. The professor looked up and said, when I realized that the prophet was lying to me, or hiding the most important part from me, I had already made up my mind. It's not easy to see through the prophet's lies. No matter how nice she said it, she couldn't ignore the fact that the survival of the clones was a problem. The smell of gunpowder in her words couldn't be concealed, so I immediately realized that the plan they were preparing was definitely a war with the clones. They were planning a war to solve this problem. At this time, the choice I made was already obvious. Chen-Ong shook his head and said, but you should know that my way of solving problems has never been so pleasant. It's very likely that it will be something you don't want to see. I'm ready. Chen-Ong smiled. He saw Sephiroth spread his wings and fly high toward the sun. The 3 pairs of light wings were shining with the same brilliance. He could see countless wings of light stretching out from Sephiroth's back, connecting the sky and the earth. Everywhere he looked, there was boundless light, making it hard for him to open his eyes. Sephiroth, the child of the sun, the outflow of divinity, the tree of life, and the path of the fire sword. Kabbalah. The brilliance of the sun in the sky covered everything. Such a strong light made people unable to see the dense and flowing river of light in the middle. The sky was white and dazzling, and Sephiroth had long disappeared in the long river of light. With the sun as the center, the light quantum field with a diameter of more than 5 light-years suddenly paused for a moment. If one were to observe the Earth from outer space, they might discover that the rays of the sun that approached the Earth had formed a distorted and strange ocean of sunlight outside the atmosphere. light patterns that looked like scales extended from outer space to the earth, outlining the shape of feathers. On both sides of the earth, there seemed to be countless wings made of light, gently flapping along with the fluctuation of the ocean of light. These huge wings with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers were endless. Houston Observatory. The experienced scientists who had even seen the impact of a world-destroying meteorite on the Earth thought that nothing could scare them anymore. However, the data from the Hubble telescope still made them feel suffocated. A group of experts composed of dozens of researchers was urgently analyzing the data. These people were like panicked chipmunks, running around helplessly. A manager whose hair was as messy as a chicken's nest roared at the scientists whom he had to respect in the past. "Tell me, how could you come up with such a ridiculous value? Even a college student can do better than you. What's with the wrong decimal point? It's negative infinity. Are you telling me that the sun is going to go out?" he said in an absurd and laughable voice. "God, there are still a few months until April Fool's Day. There are still billions of years until the end of the sun. Tell me what the f*ck is going on. Our eyes and ears can deceive us, but mathematics can't. Unless the data from the Hubble telescope is wrong, but this is a value that has been verified by 58 of the most authoritative observatories in the world. The energy that the sun transmits to the Earth is declining by the negative infinity. There are only 3 minutes left before the sun goes dark." A seemingly neurotic researcher retorted. "You mean the sun is going to go out?" The manager shook his head crazily. "It's not extinguished. According to our calculations, the solar radiation reflected by Mars, Mercury, and Saturn is normal. Only Earth's sunlight has disappeared. We speculate that the solar radiation has not disappeared, but it has changed from light radiation to another form, dark radiation. In other words, it is radiation that we can't observe and can't directly affect us." The Neurosis Research Institute rambled on. "Shut up!" The manager interrupted him. He opened the curtains and roared at the sunny world outside. "The sun is still there. You guys are crazy." Before he finished speaking, the sunlight that shone on his body was like snow in midsummer, silently disappearing, leaving only a thin layer of light. The document in someone's hand fell to the ground with a thud. No one looked back. Everyone seemed to have their souls sucked away by the scene outside the window. They stared blankly at the empty shadow in the sky. "God!" The manager let out a painful cry from his throat. Chen Ong stood at the top of the mountain and looked at the sunlight in the sky disappearing bit by bit. 2 silver-white balls of light with no temperature hung in the sky at the same time. One was the moon and the other was the sun. All over the world, whether it was day or night, whether it was at the North Pole or the South Pole, the sky showed a pale white of dawn. The 2 stars hung high in the sky, reflecting a faint white light. Some of the brighter stars in the sky could already be seen. When the sun went dark, the stars appeared in the daytime, signifying great misfortune. In the White House, in Buckingham Palace, in Fontainebleau Palace, in the Kremlin, in Zhongnanhai. The brains of mankind, the leaders of the sovereign countries with the most activeness, all stared at the passing light in the sky. A thick beam of light pierced through the sky and shone on the highly reflective clouds in the sky. The bright light illuminated the entire city. When the last ray of light dragged its feet and left the sky, hundreds of cities around the world began to flicker with giant light. When the sun went dark, it was the day of learning to walk. Leave the darkness and run towards the destined bright sea of stars. To be continued. Chapter 134. Darkness engulfed the entire world, and Earth lost its voice. Looking down from outer space, on this planet shrouded in darkness, countless spots of light spread in all directions according to the law of human activity. A power that had been accumulating power was brewing in the darkness. The restlessness and uneasiness under the light were comforted by the darkness. The silent world was quiet and beautiful. In Tokyo, the sun did not rise today. The temperature on the surface continued to drop, But because of the popularization of fusion energy, humans did not lack energy to maintain their body temperature. Immeasurable energy radiation left the Earth in a short instant, turning this bright land into the cradle of darkness. It also caused the temperature of life to fall into a freezing cold. The star that shone on the Earth for billions of years, the power that humans were most familiar with, most loved, most feared, and most worshipped. The god of human civilization was Apollo Ra, the Golden Crow, Hao-Tian, Tai, Amaterasu, and Amun. The unparalleled divine existence of civilization did not rise today. After the most ordinary truth collapsed, it was often the deepest fear. The dark night was like the shadow of the apocalypse, like the fear of ice, like an irresistible darkness. For the first time, humans had such a deep understanding of the shadow that stood behind civilization, the existence that destroyed Manhattan and shocked the world. Now, everyone deeply understood how gentle the gravitational tide that occurred in the center of Manhattan was. He only set the scope of influence on a narrow island. Although that small island was the most prosperous center of the entire world, compared to an asteroid hitting the Earth, a superhuman artificial intelligence that suddenly changed, the cosmic zerg that devoured everything, the quantum plague, and the extinguishing of the sun, the small matter of attacking Manhattan was not worth mentioning. If it was not because this was the first announcement of the apocalypse, it would not even be ranked in the top 10 of the chronology of the apocalypse. In the darkness, people clearly remembered the turning point of everything. On television all over the world, the announcement made by the figure that appeared at the same time on the network. I am a traveler in time and space, a messenger of progress. I am just a passerby in every world. I enjoy the scenery of different worlds. I listen to the surging voice of fate. I announce the direction of progress. Let me witness the wonders of this world. No matter where you are, no matter if you are a hero, criminal, I will witness everything. I am the king of the world. At that time, the world's most dangerous terrorist appeared and took away the glory of Al-Qaeda after September 11. The economic center of the world's most powerful country was destroyed. People thought that no terrorist organization could be crazier and more dangerous than this. Apart from a world war and a nuclear crisis, this was the most terrifying thing in the world. The most dangerous terrorists. Mutants were a threat to the world. Thus, Skynet appeared. In the future, the culprit behind the destruction of human civilization, the incarnation of war, the mutants were like cute and harmless babies in front of it. Even the most extreme of the mutants, the Brotherhood represented by Magneto, are full of peace lovers in the face of the war on Skynet. The crisis of the U.S. economy. Black Friday in the stock market. After the oil crisis and the financial meltdown, the stock market became a thing of the past. In this economic era known as the Great Crash, everything that had defined the economy in the past had changed. They could all be swept into the trash. The resurrection of the Red Spectre made the entire world run in a completely unknown direction. The wheels of history ran wild. A huge crisis that threatened human civilization. After the collision of heaven and earth, after the arrival of the mutants, after the penetration of Skynet technology, the advent of dimensional reduction, the quantum virus, stellar life, the extinction of the sun, and a series of crises, people on Earth no longer cared about such trivial matters. Compared to what human civilization had experienced, the mutants' split movement was really not worth making a fuss about. In a short period of 1 year, the nerves of the entire society were trained to be extremely tough. The threat of the mutants, the power that was difficult to control in the past, had become a joke today. The great bankruptcy and economic collapse that would have destroyed the lives of most ordinary people were immediately forgotten in the face of the continuous oncoming crisis. The professor silently watched the darkness gradually cover the earth. He was waiting very patiently for the moment when everything would change. He could feel the great power that could change the world at such a close distance. Everything that was built on the human civilization seemed so insignificant in the face of this astronomical vastness and eternity. Humans were too small. In the hundreds of trillions of galaxies, in the countless galaxies, the Earth could not be described as insignificant. It simply had no sense of existence. In the face of the universe, human civilization was terrifyingly small. Is this how you feel? Apocalypse, it's hard for me to imagine the emptiness you feel in the face of such greatness. The professor sighed. What does it feel like to understand everything, to be omniscient and omnipotent? For others, the extremely brilliant civilization, what does it look like in your eyes? Everything in this world, how much of it makes you feel tasteless? There really aren't many interesting things. Chenong smiled and said, It's the same for interesting people, Professor. There are fewer and fewer existences in this world that I feel I can communicate with. Many times, the higher one stands, the deeper the research, the more one understands, and the things that were originally interesting gradually become boring. The leap of the level of life will inevitably make the past distant. Progress itself is a process of destroying one's own past. With every step forward, the personality has to undergo countless tempering and changes. After real growth, it is also a denial of one's past self. Sometimes I am also confused by a problem. What problem? The professor asked with interest. There's a ship, let's call it the Apocalypse. In the process of sailing, it constantly replaced old parts with newer and more advanced things. When it was first born, it was a sailboat. Then, it was replaced with a paddle wheel, put on iron armor, replaced the keel, and upgraded the engine. In this way, after a series of extremely difficult processes, the small sailboat became a space warship. Then, using the parts shed from this sailboat and reassembling it, making it exactly the same as before. Every part is a new sailboat from the old ship. In comparison, which one is the real Apocalypse? The Charles was used to the point of sinking. So I can't answer. The professor smiled and said, You need to agree and communicate, Apocalypse. What do you think about falling in love? Feelings are communication on an equal footing. I can tolerate the incomparably obvious parasites on my partner, the incoordination and ugliness of her body, her clumsy psychological activities and slow IQ, and her ignorance of the world. But we can't communicate. Normal people won't associate with a retard. And the gap between me and ordinary humans is even greater. Chenong paused and asked, Charles, what does it feel like to be telepathic? No one can hide their secrets in front of you, and human thoughts are transparent to you. What kind of feeling is that? It's a nightmare. I know their ugliness and their little calculations. They simply become another existence in front of me. It's like living in a mentally retarded world. I hate communicating with them, and I hate interacting with humans. That period of time almost drove me crazy. It's a lonely feeling that is incompatible with the real world. So you give in, you beg for mercy, you can't stand this loneliness. It's like a normal person can't stand the world of psychopaths, so you make yourself like them. You make a cage and trap yourself in the crowd. Chenong said calmly, But this is your choice and I won't. I'd rather be lonely to stand higher and see further. This is a kind of torture. The professor sighed. Actually, I'm curious. The professor continued, Clones are not a perfect individual. They are very pure, and this purity even lacks something necessary for an intelligent creature. In other words, they don't have a sound personality, and I even doubt if they can understand the existence of self. An existence that can't identify with self is not a perfect individual. Use them as tools. This is the cruelest period of time in this world, but liberation is also a profound test for them. At present, they still lack what they need to be an independent civilization. If they coexist with humans, there will inevitably be fierce friction. Even war. But if they leave humans, what they lack will never be able to make up for. So I want to know what you think. Chen-Ong looked at the civilization of clones and slowly said, "There is not only one form of civilization. For Earth civilization, clones lack self, but this is only from the perspective of Earth civilization. There are many forms of life, and the same is true for civilizations. Sometimes there is not only one choice." The professor looked at Chen-Ong with a solemn gaze. "What will you do?" "I'll give them a choice. Not just clones, but even humans, another form of existence that has been verified, another civilization. They can choose whether to forget everything in the past, choose a new path, and create a new existence, or walk on the path of the past." The professor asked directly, "What path?" Chen-Ong replied calmly, "Quantization, ghost state. Sephiroth will stimulate another excited state of solar radiation, creating a huge high-energy ion body covering hundreds of kilometers in the Sahara Desert, which is a huge ball of lightning with a diameter of more than 100 kilometers. This high-energy body will only exist for 1/10 of a second, and it will destroy and evaporate the human body within a nanosecond. The clones and humans who choose this path will completely change their form and become a quantum ghost state creature, just like Sephiroth. They will know and understand themselves again, and create a new civilization in another world." The professor's hand squeezed the armrest of the wheelchair so hard that it made a cracking sound. Because of the violent force, his hand became pale. "This is death. No, this is the immortality of the Grim Reaper," Chen-Ong said. "Civilizations in the quantum state may not be able to communicate directly with civilizations in the material dimension, but they can interfere with this world to a certain extent. In the collective subconscious world of humans, you can see their information in some universe constant. Do you want to see their flash? Take a look at the words they left behind when they bid farewell to this world." Chen-Ong handed the professor a pair of red-colored glasses and said, "Go and take a look. P.S. The 3rd chapter of the 8th chapter is really exhausting to think of the ending. This volume is coming to an end. I really can't write fast, so I can only rely on time to update. Currently, it takes me 3 hours to write a chapter." Chapter 135. "Do you still remember the first time we met, Professor?" Chen-Ong stood at the peak of Mount McKinley and looked down at the dark world, just like when he first set foot in this world. From here to the distance, for thousands of years, human civilization had experienced glory, decline, destruction, and rise. But just like a light that never went out in the eternal night, even though humans had been courting death and moving forward happily on the path of courting death, their legacy had never been extinguished. They had always been limited to small skirmishes. So far, they only had the ability to perish together with the entire Earth's ecosystem. Chen-Ong believed that this was far from fulfilling the potential of humans. They needed a bigger stage. They were blessed by the heavens. Black Phoenix could dissociate atoms, Professor X could control minds, Magneto could control basic forces, and Shadowcat could travel through time. But what was the dream of these heroes and villains? They went from the microscopic to the macroscopic, from the multiverse to the sudden change of dimensions, from the past to the future, through different universes and collapsed dozens of parallel worlds. They fought for the liberation and ambition of the mutant. Chen-Ong felt that it was time to end these skirmishes. He flicked his finger and moved an indescribable quantum anomaly in front of him. The electromagnetic particles surging in the air suddenly turned into an anomaly other than the two-dimensional state. Visible light, invisible light, electromagnetic waves, dark matter waves, gravity, and nuclear force were gently fluctuated, controlled, grasped, and sorted out by this hand. Chen-Ong moved his finger slightly, and the world changed. With the technological power of the global war Skynet, with the transformation of the hungry mutants, with the quantum state of the plague virus Genova, the dark radiation covering the Earth, and the abnormal fluctuations of the light quantum, the ability to move particles at the molecular level was locked. Movements above the atomic level were all frozen by this power. The world stopped at this moment. The monsoon in the air, the tides in the sea, and even the vibrating sound waves of children's laughter. The kinetic potential energy of the girl's flying skirt, the burning chemical reactions, and the moving fluid molecules were all frozen at this moment. There was only sunlight. The long-awaited sunlight sprinkled on people's faces. The electric current was still moving in the copper wires. The interaction between all the matter on Earth had reached a stable equilibrium state at this moment. That was, the entropy between the high and low energy levels had reached its maximum value, and the energy was completely evenly distributed. Without affecting the visible matter, he could use the activity of the light quantum to achieve an infinite state of entropy in a short period of time, creating a relative balance of known energy at the microscopic level. Relying on the near-infinite energy supply of solar radiation, when the total amount of energy controlled by Chen-Ong completely exceeded the total amount of energy on the surface of the Earth, using the compensation effect of absolute majority energy, Chen-Ong really reached the relative maximum value of entropy in the molecular state at this moment. Of course, this was also the limit of a medium-sized star. Chen-Ong had done some calculations. If the entropy reached infinity at the level of the atomic nucleus, it would need to burn the mass of the entire Sun in an instant to stop the energy movement of the Earth for 1/10 of a second. Therefore, time stopped at this moment. In other words, the molecular movement on the Earth's surface was in a state of absolute zero. Everything was frozen. Hello everyone. We meet again. I'm greeting everyone at the highest peak of the Alaskan mountain range, Mount McKinley. A kind of psychic fluctuation spread across the entire planet. No matter where they were, people could not refuse this familiar figure from the bottom of their hearts. Chen-Ong stood at the top of the snowy peak, following his line of sight, looking down at the entire world. Once upon a time, before I arrived, this world operated according to a law that everyone could understand. The world operated according to a law that everyone could understand. At that time, Manhattan was prosperous, the financial industry was strong, gold was still a hard currency, and oil was the world's black blood, the lifeline of industry. In that beautiful era, the United States was free and democratic. The United States is free and democratic, while Saudi Arabia is rich and well off. The biggest threat to world peace is still the militants who are curled up in poor, hot lands, or some peace-loving world police who specialize in creating hotbeds for terrorists. To maintain the peace of the world, there is no need to fight against robots. At that time, the police didn't need to drive mobile armors, and soldiers didn't need to fight with artificial intelligence, biochemical creatures, and quantum life. Mutants didn't need to learn advanced physics, and humans didn't need to use memory infusion devices to learn to manipulate nanoworms and physical constants. Most importantly, there were no asteroids falling from the sky, and there were no global plagues. The sun wouldn't go out, and the molecular movement wouldn't stop at any time. When Chen-Ong said this, he gently pointed at the three strange existences beside him. No war, no famine, no plague, and no death. Countless lives on Earth, including but not limited to Americans, Europeans, Soviets, Chinese, Indians, mutants, intelligent apes, and aliens, did not praise this honest and true conclusion in their hearts. Chen-Ong had no way of knowing what they were thinking, nor was he interested. Apocalypse. What exactly are you going to bring to this world? At this time, only those who had mastered the power of the mind could still speak, and the only psionic ability user who could cross the entire Earth and contact Chen-Ong on Mount McKinley could only be the professor. From the beginning to the end, my actions have been consistent, and my purpose is clear at a glance. Chen-Ong smiled and said, "If I can give this world more possibilities and more excitement, then whether it's survival or destruction, rise or fall, and no matter what form it takes, what path it takes, let me witness the excitement of civilization. Whether the final result is sublimation or destruction, I will witness it all." Chen Ong looked at the people whose expressions were frozen at the moment, feeling the fluctuations caused by their intense emotions in the void, and laughed involuntarily. As for what you think, I don't care. What I do has nothing to do with you. Ignoring the professor's shocked gaze, ignoring the fierce resistance of all humans, and facing the silent doubts, Chen Ong answered their questions with action and solved their curiosity. What do you want to do? Chen Ong smiled at the void, facing the searching eyes of the whole world, and said, "Let me first explain to you a term, the critical point of dimensionality reduction. This concept involves a series of complicated and difficult things such as information barriers, conceptual dimensions, cognitive structures, and dimensional changes." With a light snap of his fingers, everyone's consciousness sank into the deepest darkness. At first, God creates heaven and earth. Chen Ong, like the only order, floated above the chaos. The earth is empty and chaotic. The abyss is dark. God's spirit moves on the water. Let there be light. This voice sounded in everyone's heart. No matter how extreme humans denied and struggled, the concept of light in their consciousness was redefined. Before Chen Ong, there was no light in the world. After Chen Ong, there was only light in the world, as he defined it. This is the first step of dimensionality reduction, information coverage. It represents that my cognition has covered your concept of light by more than 2 orders of magnitude. Before this, your understanding of light was completely covered, which means that you could not distinguish between truth and falsehood, so before this, you had no light. Chen Ong sighed and said, "And after that, what you can explore and understand is only my light, my definition of light, my will, and my ideas. You've put in a lot of effort, but what you've studied might just be a setting of mine. What you've studied painstakingly is just a falsehood that I fabricated. At that time, I am the truth, I am the law." Everyone's heart fell into the abyss. And the second step of dimensionality reduction is the 2 worlds of reality and illusion. Science is a whole system and cognition is a complete world. When information covers more than 2 orders of magnitude, this race will have no future. Because the direction they are moving in is a false, controlled path of truth. With Chen Eng's narration, in the originally dark abyss, the shadow of the real world began to emerge. Flowers, grass, trees, wind and air, water and fluid, they were all the same stagnant worlds, and the same tiny selves. Most humans could no longer distinguish between the world controlled by Chen Ong and what was reality. The last step is dimensionality reduction. When humans become a part of this dominated and controlled information, the existence of humans will be assimilated. Everything that constitutes you, about information, memory, and personality, will also become a part of the controlled information world and fall from the dimension you are in. Humans will become a nightmarish existence, a low-dimensional creature that can be recognized and controlled. In the eyes of the world, Chen Eng's smile was like a demon. Just like what I have shown before. In front of Chen Ong, the first piece of rubble floated up again. Power and energy are things that can be easily obtained. As long as one has enough knowledge and control, they can be easily obtained. When one's wisdom and control reach a certain level, it will be a nightmare. Whether it is information, material, or energy control, it is the same. Chen Ong paused. You still have 2 weeks. There is still a buffer of 2 weeks before the information level of the sudden dimensional change. During this time, struggle. Work hard. For the freedom of your soul and fate, protect the dignity of reality. Whether you want to be a dominated NPC or a free player, it depends on your efforts. It depends on the critical point of the information explosion of the entire civilization, the transition of cognition, and the sudden change of civilization. Fortunately, you still have the wall-facing plan. Achieving a transition of information before the civilization reaches the critical point is your only choice. Civilization was facing the final crossroads, and it was no longer allowed to hesitate. No matter what the road ahead was, it had to move forward. Rush out of Earth and realize the sudden change of civilization. Every country was about to launch the final and craziest wall-facing plan. And Chen Ong had given his choice. The quantum civilization with Death's immortality, the Starsoul civilization with Void's psionic energy. Chapter 136. On the third day after dark, Beijing. New Dagger. Located in the underground base in Tongzhou, the inconspicuous building on the surface extended to the underground base building complex that was hundreds of meters deep. Its size was comparable to the surface of Beijing. The magma extracted from the Earth's mantle was extracted into heavy elements by the base's magnetic-controlled cold separation furnace, which supplied the nuclear fusion fuel at the core of the base. The endless supply of magma could provide all the energy and more than 90% of the materials for the base. The top scientists and mutants in the country also gathered here. In terms of energy physics and space physics, this was the most cutting-edge experimental base and talent center on Earth. It was also the last fortress for the country to deal with the sudden change of dimensions. After dark, this place had become one of mankind's last hopes. At this time, in the core optical computer of the base, an old man dressed in plain clothes was floating in front of tens of thousands of holographic screens from different angles. Through his slightly transparent body, one could see the researchers working nervously in the base, and the base operating at full power in an orderly manner. This old man was actually a holographic projection. In front of the old man's projection, the bureau chief was fully focused on the light screen above his head. The rapidly scrolling data made him extremely focused. Even his fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white from overexertion. Although the bureau chief's willpower was very strong, this amount of data that exceeded the human body's endurance still made his spirit on the verge of collapse. The bureau chief pressed hard on his swollen and painful temples and asked, academicianly, "How's the plan going?" The projection of the old man in the air replied, "Everything is good in terms of material preparation, but the information obtained from the exploration of other dimensions and time tracing is still too little. At this rate, we may not be able to complete the information puzzle before the critical point of dimension reduction. And our previous batch of scientists, who volunteered to undergo thinking sublimation, Academician Tang and the others' thinking is nearing its twilight. Dr. Hu Qian, who quantized thinking, has almost lost her personality. However, the fuzzy quantum logic body she left behind has become the judgment core of the base, and has played an unparalleled role in the research work. Dr. Wang Zhixiang, Academician Ling Weidong and 52 other scientists have applied for the quantization of thinking. Hearing this, the bureau chief closed his eyes tiredly. Ever since the emergence of mankind's hyperdimensional technology, too many outstanding researchers sacrificed themselves for it. They contributed themselves to the research facilities of the base, and made great contributions to the base and the plan in another form of existence. On the other hand, their personalities had perished, and their thoughts had fallen into twilight. They had turned into mindless specters. Not only in the country, but all over the world, in order to break through the limits of human intelligence and cut off the shackles that restrained the sublimation of intelligence, there were too many researchers who used themselves as experimental subjects to create the evolved body of human thinking. They used their deaths to push human technology forward step by step. In the virtual world, his brain died in the nutrient tank because his thinking speed was too fast. There were more than 50,000 researchers who had to reduce their dimensions to survive in the virtual world. The large-scale computational logical thinking entity of the United States, David, was a result of 3,000 dimensionality reduction scientists sacrificing themselves to achieve this. Just in the Beijing base alone, more than 10,000 researchers had voluntarily given up and modified their brains into biological protein computers, using the computing power of computers and human creativity to make immortal contributions to mankind. biocomputer, quantized thinking, and intelligent personality. Formatted thinking, technology after technology, sacrifice after sacrifice, in exchange for a high level of understanding and understanding of their own intelligence, scientists opened the shackles of intelligence for mankind. For the continuation of human civilization, they made unimaginable sacrifices. In exchange for the rapid advancement of mankind's science and many major breakthroughs in the wall-facing plan. In 3 months' time, a miraculous breakthrough was completed. You don't have much time left. A line of blood-red words suddenly appeared on the light screen in front of the bureau chief. Prophet. The bureau chief frowned and said, "Please speak frankly. The wall-facing plan is a prophet. The interference I brought to the apocalypse from the high latitude is getting weaker and weaker. Now, the amount of interference I have with the future of this world is gradually becoming a controllable variable for the consciousness of the apocalypse. He is gradually controlling me. Prophet. With just this, we are unable to fight against the apocalypse. You must tell us more specific information." The bureau chief asked directly. "I can tell you that there is no future world, or the future is in a quantum state. Only at the moment when the future becomes the past, the entire future world will collapse into what you know. In this process, what determines the development of the world, the form of the future world, and the specific information of the world are the world's disturbances. The biggest uncertainty in the development of this world is also the world's disturbances. The biggest uncertainty is not energy or matter, but consciousness. A casual action of an ordinary human can have a greater impact on the future of billions of stars, because consciousness is free and full of unlimited possibilities. So, your existence in the high dimension is related to the world's disturbances. In terms of the factor that determines the future, which is the ability to interfere with the world, I can't compare with the apocalypse at all. His ability to interfere with the world is on a different level to me. What I can do for you is to destroy the apocalypse's ability to predict the future, which means that the future development of the world is not within his expectations, and provide opportunities for you to create other possibilities. Both the apocalypse and I can see the future, but I can't be sure what the future will be like after the apocalypse interferes with it. So, in my eyes, the future is in a quantum state, an existence with unlimited possibilities, like a river with countless branches. But now, the branches of the future, the tributaries of the river of time, have been restrained by the apocalypse. In other words, in the future predicted by the apocalypse, my variables are getting fewer and fewer, and the uncertain factors in the future quantum state in his eyes are also getting fewer and fewer. The results of what he does are getting closer and closer to what he foresees and wants to achieve. Omniscience is omnipotence. The fewer variables and disturbances that can give him misplaced foresight, the closer the apocalypse is to omniscience. I'm being covered, my variables are disappearing. Everything I do is gradually under the control of Tianqi. The time he foresees is getting further and further away, and the variables he controls are also increasing. One day, he will become a Laplacian demon, a state that can determine the outcome of the future collapse, and when that time comes, I will become a Laplacian. And at that time, it will not be far from the moment when he determines the outcome of the future collapse. At that time, he can determine the future and change the past. At that time, the past will no longer be a certain fact. Instead, it will be the present in the definite state of the past and the quantum state of the future. In other words, every moment is the apocalypse of the present state that foresees the future to change. At that time, we will have no hope. So, I hope that you can become a greater interference and let the country face the wall. There will be more room to play with the interference of the world. At some point, the leaders of the base had all come to the optical screen of the Central Intelligence. Looking at the words on the screen, they felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. They had to admit that if they could foresee all, even most of the future possibilities, for the apocalypse that controlled the sky, it would be more than a joke to be omnipotent. Why us? The bureau chief asked. Because you involve more consciousness. Only more consciousness and more free will can interfere with the control of the apocalypse to a greater extent. Only more variables can affect the control of the information in the world of the apocalypse, and humans from other dimensions, or even non-humans, will be our only hope. Only other higher dimensional interference, even if he is not an enemy of the apocalypse, as long as he exists, he will be a variable that interferes with the apocalypse. More observers, higher dimensional interference, these are all existences with powerful interference, and also the only hope to prevent the spread of the apocalypse on the timeline. The bureau chief's index finger gently tapped on the table in front of him and looked at the words displayed on the optical screen. He shook his head. But there is still one thing you didn't tell me. Your actions are gradually under the control of the apocalypse, so I don't think that what you do today, the apocalypse will know nothing. What you do is not your will. It is better to use your mouth to express the will of the apocalypse. What is he going to do? What is he going to do? Why does the apocalypse want to destroy its own high-dimensional state? The words on the optical screen were silent. Why don't you tell me? The prophet? The bureau chief asked. Because this is what he is looking forward to. This is also what he acquiesces to, and even promotes. The optical screen flashed. Your plan is full of difficulties. For it to develop to this point, in addition to the sacrifice of the participant, there is also the tacit approval and even promotion of the apocalypse. He will never refuse you to go to a higher and broader vision, and he will never stop you from moving forward. For any plan that can open up a new world, the apocalypse will never refuse. This is the only way I can understand his thinking. The bureau chief looked down and smiled after a while. So he will guarantee and even promote the implementation of our plan? As long as there is a possibility of this plan succeeding, then it will definitely succeed. In the center of the base, the electromagnetic ring was still spinning. In the deeper parts of this world, in the empty parts of the void, some more complex structures, more special substances and energy existed outside the visible world. On the other side of the same world, in another angle of the same inch of space, that seemingly illusory world, Chen Eng's figure stood there. The indescribable substances and energy were defined by him, recompiled, and became an existence that could be understood. This quantum information spread to the whole world. Tawny, Loki, we Edgars, you live to be ruled by me. No matter what humble struggles you make, in the end, you will kneel in front of me and bow down to me like now. Listen, one-eyed dragon. You don't understand the world other than Earth. What is the universe tesseract? You don't know what you are doing. It is not as simple as you think. It is dangerous. It is here to send an invitation to the whole universe, and even other worlds, to tell them that you are ready for a high-level war. You are here. Universe Tesseract. Space Door. Chitauri. Invasion. In the Beijing base, the flashing optical screen suddenly stopped, and all the flashing images on the projection screen were replaced by a line of words. Extraction of dimensional information, number SCD-9527, anchored world, location successful, receiving information from the other dimension, from the device Universe Tesseract. Coordinates fixed successfully, dimensional membrane anchored, beginning two-way breakthrough. 10-9-8-1-0. Dimensional space door set up, open three-phase space door? The entire underground base was silent, everyone held their breath and stared at the flashing words on the screen. The bureau chief ordered sternly, "Contact Soviet, I want to talk to Yuri. All troops get ready. Send out detectors to the other side, collect information, all bases get ready for battle. Be on full alert. To be continued. P.S. This is part of the volume, about the country's plan to face the wall. At the same time, it is also a preview of the Marvel Universe volume that may be written in the future. Of course, the next world will be the same. The entire X-Men world will be inserted into the Marvel plot in a strange state, probably the plot of the Alliance fighting against S.H.I.E.L.D., Chun-Ong against Thanos, Soviet beating up the Chitauri, the Avengers against the mutants, and Ultron against the Sky. Chapter 137. Standing at the top of the building, Loki held his scepter and faced the people who followed him. Behind him, a pillar of light shot into the sky, transmitting powerful energy fluctuations in all directions. From the infinite universe to the fine dimensional lines in the void, the energy fluctuations were transmitted to the depths of the universe in the form of quantum fluctuations. Loki controlled the terrifying power of the Tesseract and opened a door to a set of special coordinates through the prism device of the four-pillar space door. What made him feel uneasy was that the Tesseract's energy output was much higher than expected, but the reaction speed of the space gate was very slow. It was as if it was carrying a huge burden, making a buzzing sound as if it couldn't bear the load. Strange? Why is the load of the space door close to collapse? It shouldn't be so difficult to connect to planet Chitauri. Could it be that those idiots broke the equipment on the other side again? Loki frowned. The heroes of the Revival Alliance were already approaching quickly, and he didn't think that his little trick could hide it from them for long. Moreover, anyone who wasn't blind could see this pillar of light, and he didn't have much time left. Fortunately, after the pillar of light was opened, it couldn't be forcibly closed, and now that the space door was in an unstable state, no one dared to destroy it. Loki! The evil god turned around and saw a red and gold metal warrior descending from the sky. The metal armor glowed with a cold light, and the streamlined design of the body reflected the beauty of the industry. Iron Man tilted his head, and the energy pulse under his feet kept him floating in the air. You destroyed my Staney building. To be honest, I'm very angry, Iron Man said in a low voice, a complete opposite of his previous sloppy attitude. Oh, clown, are you putting on an act in your costume again? You Earthlings are really ridiculous. Look at what you're wearing. Tight clothes, masks, and unesthetic uniform design. Don't you feel ashamed wearing these? Loki raised his scepter and pointed it at Iron Man. You look like a pervert. What a disgusting aesthetic. An adopted bastard obviously doesn't have the right to say that. Tawny sneered. Loki turned his head, his eyes filled with a tyrannical and crazy aura. Shut up, and you don't have the right to judge a king. I'm the Prince of Edgar, and I'm also your king. I've studied you Earthlings. You naturally obey the strong, don't you? In your short-lived civilization, there was a long period of royal rule, and in your culture, submission to rule and power occupied the majority. Obedience is your nature. Ever since you were a bunch of monkeys, ever since you enslaved each other. From the time you flatter the king's rule, admit it, your nature longs to yield to a powerful, noble being. This is the only meaning of your existence, to serve the strong, to worship me as your king. Now kneel. Loki's face was twisted with jealousy, madness, and gloom. Humans worship heroes and respect kings because they are heroes and kings, not because they are high and mighty. Not to mention a lunatic like you? Captain America stepped out from the side, behind him. The Green Giant's muscles were bulging, filled with power and a tyrannical aura. The huge giant looked at Loki's eyes with extreme cruelty and rage, giving Loki a sense of oppression that forced him to take a few steps back. I think humans may obey heroes, but that's undoubtedly people like me. Tawny looked at Loki with a subtle look of contempt, and said in a strange tone, not a clown. Facing the approaching heroes, Loki took a few steps back and used his scepter to connect himself with the spatial door. Light blue energy appeared on his body. It emitted fluctuations like the spatial door. Loki, who felt safe again, glanced at everyone contemptuously. Stupid humans. How can you understand the power of the tesseract of the universe? With just a little energy fluctuation, the small planet that you live on will be blown to pieces like mud. Loki laughed out loud when he saw the Avengers heroes, who didn't dare to step forward due to his scruples. Earth is mine, and you are also mine. Seek your freedom, stupid humans. The only meaning of existence for insignificant humans is to be ruled by me. It's to be ruled by the noble and powerful me. The warriors of the Chitauri are my loyal dependents, and you are my humble slaves. Your only value is to serve as a foil to my greatness. My warriors, the warriors of the Chitauri, it will only take me a blink of an eye to destroy this small island. This damned Manhattan will become ruins because of my will, because of your stupidity. This country, this planet, before my invincible army, only has one fate, and that is to wail, cry, kneel, and submit. The pillar of light in the sky suddenly fluctuated violently, and the distorted light expanded into a huge shadow with a diameter of tens of kilometers. Rumbling sounds came from within, and the powerful energy pressure and earth-shattering shouts caused the legs of all the humans in Manhattan to tremble. The sound of steel colliding, the frantic shouts, and the crazy and tyrannical killing intent made the heroes feel as if they were facing a great enemy. Loki stood proudly before the pillar of light, laughing loudly and wantonly venting his emotions. Tremble! Humans! Fear! Humans! This is my country, and I welcome your king, your ruler. No matter how you struggle, in the end, before my army, the only thing you can do is to immediately kneel before me and bow down to me. The pillar of light opened the door to the dimension. A glaring red fluttered high in front of the door of the dimension. The bright red was like fresh blood. On top of the red, a handle extended out from the end of the golden crescent moon, forming a cross with the hammer. Above the shocking ruins, twisted steel, crashed spaceships, and the corpses of the Chitauri were evenly distributed on the ground. Organs and internal organs were scattered all over the ground, and limbs were hanging on the burning steel spaceship. On the tragic battlefield, a smear of red fluttered high in the sky. That was the bright red flag of the sickle and hammer. The smell of smoke and burning heat, mixed with the pungent smell of the Chitauri's blood, rushed into the noses of everyone present. The radiation rays that rushed toward them felt a slight pain when they pierced their skin. The shock waves mixed with the steel shards made them feel dazed, and they did not know where they were. Only the familiar smell of vodka at the tip of their noses and the earth-shattering shouts could keep them awake. Hurrah! The deafening cheers, passionate shouts, and the familiar aura of war. The first thing the heroes of the Revival Alliance saw was not that they were ready to go. The alien invaders were like mountains and seas, but their corpses and ruins, and the familiar voices that made them tremble. Broken skulls, unknown brown objects that looked like minced meat. There were also all kinds of strange corpses that rushed out of the dimension door along with a violent explosion. They scattered on Loki's body, and the stinky filth sprayed on his face. Loki wiped his face with trembling hands, and shook his head with a pale face. What's going on? What happened? He found a head that was not badly damaged. It was not easy to stab the brain of the Chitauri's corpse with the scepter. This was because this was the only corpse that was relatively intact among the parts that were scattered all over the ground. If he did not get any useful information, Loki would not have a second chance. Fortunately, everything that happened before this unlucky guy's death could be said to be unforgettable. 3 hours ago, when Earth first opened the space energy of the Tesseract, the Chitauri were still waiting behind the dimension door in high spirit. They were preparing to be cruel alien invaders. They piloted a snake-shaped spaceship, held a laser gun, and waited for the powerless and weak Earth to open the door to them. The Chitauri imagined them killing and plundering wantonly on Earth, venting their cruelty and tyranny, using death and brutality to bring endless fear to the people of Earth. This made their morale even higher, and the excitement of destruction and wanton made them restless. The dimension door quickly opened. But what appeared in front of them was not the weak civilization of this world, but the Earth invaders from another world. Terrifying Earth invaders. The Chitauri's memory was full of fear and blood. He died of intracranial hemorrhage caused by the violent shaking. The reason was very simple. A space shock bomb exploded in their spaceship. After the chaotic density of space distorted their alloy spaceship, it also stirred up his brain, creating a pool of paste. Loki felt that it was not appropriate to judge this paste of blood paste mixture as intracranial hemorrhage. It should be called racking one's brain. The horrifying Earthlings had explained what cruelty was. They had reshaped the Chitauri's definition of cruelty, including coldness, brutality, and bloodshed. They had overthrown the Chitauri's imagination and understanding of extraterrestrial creatures. On the Chitauri's planet, they had used their wars throughout history to help the indigenous extraterrestrials recognize the term. War was equal to steel, destruction, death, sacrifice, and endurance, as well as naked violence and terror. Endless destruction with killing as the primary purpose. War was equal to the Soviet, and politics was equal to rabbits. The Earth invaders were divided into 3 groups, and even the flags were very familiar to him. A sickle and a hammer appeared in the upper left corner, and there was a flag accompanied by a yellow star. It was a country that had disappeared on Earth not long ago. Loki never thought that they would march into the universe and become invaders who destroyed the peace of the universe. The other flag was also bright red. 5 yellow stars shone brightly in the upper left corner of the flag. The force represented by this flag only took 2 hours to build a huge fortress on the ruins. Lava was extracted from the Earth's crust and refined into steel monsters and more ferocious fortresses and buildings. They spread infinitely on the Chitauri planet. Large pieces of continental shelf were uprooted. Huge machines dismantled the Chitauri planet. Hundreds of miles of huge pits went deep into the planet's mantle. Massive materials were processed and created. They reshaped the planet. Huge warheads weighing hundreds of trillions of tons rushed out of the mantle, drew an arc, and plunged into the other side of the planet. Loki saw an endless army of Earth invaders rushing out of such warhead bases. They controlled robots that were tens of thousands of times more than the number of people, spreading, moving, and reshaping the planet. The last flag had a blue background with a red floating image of the European continent. In the middle of the flag, 12 golden stars surrounded the continent, forming the outer ring of the flag. The resistance of the Chitauri people was crushed into pieces by the joint forces of these 3 forces. This race that had always been cruel was now like a helpless child being pressed to the ground by a hairy, 2-meter-tall man. Destruction. The strong man, who was as thick as a bear, with a mouth full of the smell of alcohol, grinned hideously, and became the nightmare of the little girl named Chitauri. The forces represented by the golden 5 stars, however, calmly sent a friendly signal to the alien forces around the Chitauri planet, claiming that they were willing to establish friendly relations with their alien friends in accordance with the principles of mutual respect for the sovereignty of the mother planet and the integrity of the interstellar territory, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality, mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence, and strive to create a peaceful and orderly universe order together. They once again declared, the Communist Alliance will never dominate the universe, nor will it invade any planet, but for the alien invaders who dare to invade the Earth, we will respond with the most serious protest and counterattack. The people of the Earth have confidence and the ability to maintain the peace and security of the Earth. As for the rumors that the Soviets treated the Chitauri people too cruelly and carried out genocide against the aborigines of the Chitauri planet, the spokesman righteously rejected them. They claimed that this was the shameless slander of the Chitauri invaders. The Chinese planet has been a part of the Earth civilization since ancient times, and they support the Chinese people's counterattack against the Chitauri invaders. At the same time, the spokesman said that the Soviets will never be used in small-scale cosmic conflicts, and will never be the first to use the Soviets in a cosmic war. The leader of the Soviets, Yuri Marin, said that they can do whatever they want. Gossip. The leader of the Chitauri people, Thanos, had a friendly meeting with the representative of the Earth civilization, Apocalypse, in the Alpha Galaxy. The meeting lasted for 3 days, and at the cost of the destruction of a star system, they reached a consensus on 3 points. In the endless void, Chun-Ong stood at the intersection of time and space. An indescribable shadow floated behind him. He stared at the door in the void, locking countless powerful and strange consciousnesses behind him. Swallowing Star, Thanos, Nebula, Goddess of Death, Apocalypse knelt on one knee in front of him and asked respectfully, "My lord, the door of time and space has been reopened. Do you want to go back to that world?" "No need. There shouldn't be 2 of me at the same time. Since the me of the past is already in that world, then we shouldn't disturb him now. In that world you are about to be born. Apocalypse, don't let anyone enter this door." To be continued. P.S. The Marvel preview is over. It's not far from the end of this volume. The next volume is D&D. I repeat, not Marvel. Chapter 138. On the endless yellow sand of the Sahara, a long line of people trudged with difficulty. The people with faces full of hardships had calm expressions. Hardship and suffering had left traces on their faces, but it did not conquer their spirits. They were calm and unperturbed. From their expressions and eyes, it could be seen that it was not empty and numb indifference, but joy and relief after the heart had calmed down. Most of the people in the crowd had the same face, and their bodies were even somewhat deformed. Only a few people had healthy limbs, and their faces were relatively special. This was very normal. A few days ago they were still a kind of tool in human work. Modifying clones with different face shapes would increase the cost, so only a small number of custom-made clones were lucky enough to receive such an honor. Occasionally, there were some people in the line of clones who had blank expressions and more emotions. Even their expressions and appearances were more natural. They were humans who followed along. Although most of the humans had decided to leave the Earth, there were always some people who chose other paths. Compared to the extremely confusing voyage in the Sea of Stars, quantum immortality did not seem to be a bad thing. The wind, sand, and cold in the Sahara were enough to destroy metal and crack steel. Of course, they could also destroy a person's iron will. After dark, the temperature on the surface had dropped to -20 degrees Celsius. Under such circumstances, the environment in the Sahara was not any worse than other regions. Humans huddled in 281 giant cities. Occasionally, there were rumors that China, the Soviet Union, and the European Union had begun to migrate cities and people. However, most of the humans were still building their future home spaceship. All production relations no longer had meaning. Humans were carrying out arduous tasks and labor processes, reorganizing themselves according to the functions of the fleet and the division of labor. In this world, most of the governments had lost the meaning of existence. Other than the 4 sovereign political bodies with the ability to act, the other human countries had to form the Earth United Government to deal with this unprecedented disaster. However, unexpectedly, the United Government did not play any role. But unexpectedly, the coalition government didn't play any role when these politicians and bigwigs tried to carry out their functions and right. They bumped into an iron starting committee. Its full name was Civilization Starting and Space Survival-Related Construction and Preparatory Committee. The working class was the most advanced class. It was no exaggeration to prove this point. In fact, the working class that could build spaceships had long surpassed the members of parliament and bureaucrats in terms of management and construction. They had released an existence that could easily destroy them. At first, with the help of 4 political actors, the spaceship construction team possessed more than 90% of the productivity of the 4 major entities on Earth. Moreover, the spaceship was a high-end and unprecedented project in human history. The level of organization and management required could be said to be hellish. After painstakingly organizing the construction team and managing more than 1 billion workers, the monsters in the organization discovered that they themselves were the most powerful and advanced. The untouchables in India found that they had built a new country through their labor, a perfect ideal country. Distribution according to needs, communism, and the self-emancipation of the working class were all hammered and tempered in this process. These ideals that were ridiculed, these forces that were despised, when the government and capital ridiculed and despised these forces, they would never know what kind of monster they had released from the cage. Over 1 billion laborers, millions of engineering teams, an unprecedentedly powerful and centralized management organization. With the help of the clones, humanity finally completed this incredible miracle. Meanwhile, they had also obtained complete liberation and overwhelming power. This power was so strong that the original government could only tremble under it. The workers' organization that could build spaceships was compared to the government of the industrial era. It was so powerful that it was unimaginable. There was no communist party. But after the working class was liberated, there was no need for the Communist Party. For the first time in history, the group of people who represented the most advanced productivity had unknowingly completed the great cause of changing the world. In the engineering meeting, the untouchables only spent 3 minutes discussing it. They expelled the dregs of the old era. The masters and sirens of the upper castes found that the originally obedient and devout untouchables were now disobedient. The bureaucrats and bosses were also at a loss. They felt that there was no place for them to intervene in the management of society. Compared to being suppressed, what made them feel more helpless was being ignored. There was no revolution or violence, because completing a project for all mankind was more difficult than revolution and violence. It was also more thorough in changing them and the entire world. Compared to destruction, construction was undoubtedly more terrifying. The former would destroy their bodies, while the latter was destroying the foundation of their existence. When mortals built the Tower of Babel, even God would be afraid. The engineering of spaceships and the future of interstellar travel needed workers, engineers, farmers, scientists, teachers, even writers and directors, coders and waiters. It welcomed all kinds of workers. The only ones it did not need were capitalists and bureaucrats. They were abandoned by the world. Even the American fascists, who were the only ones still surviving in the old world, did not welcome them. The fascists also needed workers. They needed workers and scientists, not trash that competed with them for food. There was always a limit to the amount of trash a country could afford. The capital did not have the motherland, but the motherland had the capital. At this time, even the smallest and most ignorant person had to join this new world. In the great project that concerned the survival of mankind, all relationships were smashed. Everything in the past, about identity, education, religion, race, and social order, those deep-rooted things were violently dug out and smashed to pieces. At the most dangerous time, mankind finally completed the transformation of being reborn from the ashes. Burn the stupidity, filth, and stench of blood and pus to the ground. Those disgusting things, those evil things, those ridiculous things that were crowned as human nature, about selfishness, greed, laziness, were finally exposed to the raging fire, emitting the stench of being burned. If these bad habits were blown up to be justified and taken for granted, they would be praised as human nature. Then mankind might as well become gods. Only labor created mankind and this world, and only labor could recreate them. This was the other purpose of the wall-facing plan. Labor created everything in human society, and it could also reshape the world according to productivity. Heroes and greatness were ultimately insignificant, but only the most insignificant. Only then could the great eternity be achieved. In China, in the Soviet Union, in the European Union, in the Departure Committee, in the American Fascists, The huge project, the unprecedented transformation and construction in the history of mankind, was bound to profoundly change mankind and everything related to it. The dawn of another era had gradually risen. Even the most conservative old forces had to admit. The rope to hang it would be created by themselves. This was inevitable and unavoidable. No one could do anything in the face of such a general trend. Except for Chen. The clones formed groups and headed towards the Sahara Desert. There, Chen promised them eternal life and freedom. They longed for it. They were looking forward to everything that was coming. Life existed in another form, and civilization existed in another form. The clones longed for civilization, longed for their era. In the desert, nearly 6 billion clones and a small number of humans looked into the distance. Some clones chose to integrate into human society, and a very small number of clones wanted to create a future with the mutants. The professor and Magneto stood tens of thousands of meters in the air, watching all this. It was the time promised by Chen. The professor saw it. The sun rose in the east again, and the blazing, golden fireball reappeared in this dark world. No. It was the sun, an even more terrifying sun. The radiation intensity of the star explosion far exceeded the limit that humans could bear. Under the sun, in the dazzling light of the sun, more than 200 huge shadows rushed into the sky from all over the earth, and the metal hull larger than the mountains reflected the sun. It was like more than 200 suns. In the sky, the moon slowly began to rotate, setting off huge waves hundreds of meters high in the ocean, but humans no longer cared. On the back of the moon, a huge mechanical body revealed its true body that shocked the world. The entire moon had been replaced by a huge mechanical body. It was Skynet and only Skynet. Endless matter was set off on the Earth, flying high into the sky, converging into meteorites, asteroids, satellites, and finally colliding with the moon, and then fusing with it. On the Earth, countless giant humanoid figures with blurred faces rose from various oil production areas. This kind of mutated biochemical warship easily broke through the atmosphere. Behind them, the huge Zerg nest slowly broke through the ground of the Middle East, and the huge organism with a diameter of tens of thousands of miles rushed into space under the protection of countless mutants. Behind the moon, the light and shadow of the sun became more and more intense, and the temperature on the surface of the Earth instantly rose to 70 degrees. A huge light shadow with endless wings on its back, it was infinitely large, and each wing was more brilliant and magnificent than the moon. It could not be looked at directly, and no matter what kind of observation methods humans used, they could not see through its brilliant light. The angel of the sun, Sephiroth. In the ecosphere of the Earth, an invisible wave swept into space, rushing into the endless distance. When all of this left the Earth, Sephiroth looked at the Earth, looked at the clones waiting quietly in the Sahara, and looked at the ape-men trembling in the Amazon forest. If the ecosphere of the Earth could survive, then they would definitely engrave a terrifying species in the depths of their genes, the terrifying upright ape. The ape-men also deeply engraved the crazy and terrifying creatures like humans in their spiritual inheritance. Once upon a time, there was a planet called Earth. It had lived for about 4.55 billion years, and it was still a young planet. About 1 million years ago, a tiny creature called an erect ape was born. About 200,000 years later, humans evolved into humans. Then, there was no then. In a short period of tens of thousands of years, they evolved from animals to intelligent creatures, spent 50,000 years to enter an agricultural civilization, only used 3,000 years to enter an industrial society, and 20 years to enter the information age, the space age, and the microphysics age. Then, after the arrival of a human called the Apocalypse, the Earth was destroyed within 2 years. In just a few seconds, the sun's radiation reached its peak, and the endless radiation crazily destroyed the Earth and the ocean. In the center of the Sahara Desert, A huge ball of lightning with a diameter of tens of thousands of miles flashed for about 1/10 of a second, then destroyed the largest and oldest natural relic on the Earth. Chapter 139. Tens of thousands of meters in the air, Magneto and the professor silently watched the earth-shattering disaster, watching the clones that disappeared without a trace in the flash of a thousandth of a second. The energy intensity is as high as 50 million bits of electricity, forming a plasma field with a temperature of 100,000 degrees Celsius, which can easily evaporate any known natural substance. Under that dazzling flash, even ashes cannot be left. Humans, even specially modified clones, are obliterated from the physical world in a very short time in the face of such an energy field. Faced with such a powerful energy, even the king of electromagnetism, Magneto, can't resist. Although Magneto has a significant advantage in electromagnetic control, Sephiroth's direct control of the energy of a star is too much of a cheat. In the face of the entire solar radiation outbreak, in the face of a superradiation outbreak that exceeds the total amount of energy controlled by humans in history, even Magneto can't do anything about it. This is the end of clones, but it is also the prelude to quantum immortality. The world in Charles's eyes is dazzling light, boiling light, and the world in Eric's eyes is endless darkness and depth. Galloping lightning, flowing plasma, radiation leaping into flickering plasma in fluids and colloids, the Earth is like a huge burning torch, violently moving particles making it shine in the universe. In the background radiation of the universe, the peak microwave radiation that was originally affected by the dark radiation has returned to normal. In Magneto's eyes, the Earth is certainly a big flashing fireball, but the void space where the Earth is located is silent black. At this time, a line of light was projected on the retinas of the two men, on which were written in clear letters, "They are flashing. Where you can't see, they are saying goodbye to you." "Where?" Charles asked eagerly. The prophet did not speak. It just shielded the light around them. Charles was a little surprised. He had always thought that the prophet was incapable of large-scale interference in the physical world, but now the scene in front of him clearly overturned his opinion. In his and Magneto's vision, visible light, infrared light, and ultraviolet light all faded away little by little. The blazing fireball in his eyes gradually dimmed, and a deep and vast darkness appeared. It surrounded them all at once. This is another world, an invisible world. In this world, all the normal fluctuations belong to the dark background. Only those unusual cosmic flashes that do not appear once in tens of billions of years will cause these cosmic backgrounds to change significantly. But in such darkness, Charles and Magneto saw a faint flickering light in the black background. The entire universe, the entire world, from the sun that was 8 light minutes and 18 light seconds away to the galaxy that was 1 light year away, the entire solar system, and even places that were even further away, all of them were flashing at the same time. It was as if a lone lamp had appeared in the deep universe. Long short long short long short long short short long short long short long short, goodbye. Softly reciting the meaning of the Morse code, Charles suddenly burst into tears. Goodbye, friends. May you be happy and healthy in the days to come. I will bless you, human. Blessings in the future. We shall meet again. Put this in your memory, in your diary, in history. May you find happiness in the world. Goodbye, my friend. It was a greeting from heaven. It comes from the final destination of the soul. Humans would eventually decay, and only death could grant them eternal life. This was the final messenger of the apocalypse, death. The sixth. 1 billion humans who had turned into the cloud state of quantum probability had rebuilt their civilization in an unimaginable way. They may live forever in heaven as individuals, or they may collectively become a great existence. All of this is destined to be incomprehensible to humans living in the material world, and they cannot feel the existence of those who have passed away. In the time you breathe, when you miss them, they are always by your side. Death is not the end, but a new beginning. This is the messenger of death, a magical space that exists in the sea of human consciousness. It is called hell, called the underworld, also called heaven and hell, or the original name, the Garden of Eden. If God is the concept defined by human beings, then He is God, the will of human beings. In the universe, in addition to the space where human beings live and know, there are many deeper existences. If the universe is a map, then the part that humans can understand is less than 1/1,000,000th of this system. The huge mass of the stars in the universe is constantly annihilated, turning into a huge probability cloud in the quantum dimension, and this is the fate of death. Help me, help the humans. The prophet's words were directly projected on Charles and Eric's retina. Without telepathy, Charles could feel the weakness in her tone and the deep despair hidden behind the words. Why? Humans have left Earth, and you have gained freedom. A new era has begun. Prophet, I am old. I am afraid I can't help you much. Charles sighed. This is not the beginning of an era, but the end of everything. The prophet warned with large blood-red words. The prophet was the only mutant among humans who could predict the future. After her quantization, this ability to perceive the future allowed her to expand her vision and existence in the time dimension, becoming the only human who could reach the same level as the apocalypse in life essence. She was also one of the 4 wall-faced people in the plan. Her warning could not help but make Charles vigilant and take it seriously. The function of the future has collapsed. This was something that was originally impossible. The past is certain, but the future is uncertain. This is the foundation of our time and space, and also the fundamental law of the world. And now, all the functions of the future have collapsed into a certain form. Our universe, as an equation, has a fixed solution. The foundation of the world is shaking, and our existence is being questioned again. We are no longer in a state of future function collapse. We are no longer in a state of constant change. Our world is no longer an equation of variables, but a series of definite solutions. There are now an infinite number of solutions, covering every possible choice we can make. But it is winding up, and after 2 hours, it will get the only solution. Impossible? Charles questioned. Prophet, you are an impossible variable. No matter how powerful the apocalypse is, you, who can observe all the possibilities of the world, can create new variables. Unless it goes back to zero. There is only one result in the world. There is only one fate that is certain, and that is destruction. I can't make new variables because any possibility that is not in the future destiny will only lead to one result, destruction. And this result will also be the only solution after 2 hours. Charles, look. The prophet's words appeared on Charles and Magneto's irises word by word. A giant tree that penetrated the sky and the earth occupied the entire vision of the two. It was a tree of light composed of endless light. The flowing river of light spread on the trunk of the tree. This was a giant tree that had fallen down. The huge roots spread towards the sky like wings, and countless endless forks were extremely brilliant, connecting the sky, as if a big tree grew out of the sun and light. A perfect life. When they saw this giant tree, Charles and Magneto had only one thought in their minds. When they saw the roots that spread towards the sky, they had already remembered seeing this kind of thing in that place. Sephiroth. This is not a giant tree, but Sephiroth. Only those brilliant wings would give off this kind of feeling. And this giant tree that occupied the entire world gave Charles the same feeling as Sephiroth. This is not a coincidence. Yes, it is Sephiroth. You should know what kind of existence Sephiroth is. He is the divine soul of the sun. The saint who has a human body is also the human form of the quantum collapsed state of the star. He is a creature at the quantum level and also an existence of the material world. He is a soul. He is also a physical body. He is a real angel. But you have to understand the true meaning of the name Phiroth. This name originated from Jewish mythology and is a strictly religious term. When creating things, God sent an energy into nothingness, and this energy soon diverged and finally divided into 10 distinct properties. They are what we know as Phiroth. Thepharoth is the plural form of the divinity outflow. Apocalypse created him because of his unique life form, the most perfect creature in matter, energy, information, and soul. He is the soul of the sun, and his life essence is the quantum ghost of the star. He has a material form because of human observation, but his essence is still a creature that straddles matter, quantum, soul, and the collective consciousness of human beings. Humans gave him a material body, Apocalypse created his soul of the star, clones dedicated to him the collective consciousness of human beings, and higher dimensional projections formed his essence. These are the 4 worlds: the material world, the formation world, the creation world, and the divine world. 22 paths, 10 Phiroth, 4 worlds and 3 pillars. Sephiroth should have another name. Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Sephiroth is the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, which is the blueprint of the perfect existence created by Apocalypse. He himself is the super technology designed by Apocalypse, the supreme existence in the field of human life, the Tree of Life array. Charles stared at the giant tree in the center of his sight. He stared at the roots that pierced into the void, and the extremely brilliant fruit of the Tree of Life on the crown that represented the supreme existence of human life. He desperately used his telepathy to search for the familiar soul fluctuations. Wolverine, Laser Eyes, Pixie, and Storm's Word. But he could only feel the incomparably vast life and soul fluctuations on the giant tree in vain. The fluctuations that contained everything and merged everything. Tears flowed from the corners of his eyes in vain. This is the completion plan of human beings. The most terrible plot of Apocalypse, with the help of war, plague, famine, and death, will finally complete the ultimate life. Except for humans who go to other dimensions, except for humans who turn into quantum states, everyone will complete the completion in this final tree of life. Humans will perish in 2 hours. Everyone, no matter how humble or noble they are, no matter how small or great they are, will be integrated into the light tree and become the material for the completion plan. Charles Eric. We have no choice but to stand together again and fight for the liberation and survival of human beings. Destroy the tyranny of Apocalypse, and the world belongs to humans. Chapter 140. In the extreme environment on the Earth, the dying ecosphere under the high-temperature radiation emerged with a white-silver light, converging into a lake of light like a flowing river. Under the eyes of Charles and Magneto, the wide variety of creatures on the Earth melted into a strong light like a burning candle. At this moment, the Earth has become a flowing sea of light. The fish in the sea of trees in the forest, countless rays of light emerged from the bodies of those creatures, like stars on the ground, from a scattered cluster, blooming all over the Earth and the sea, and finally converging into a dazzling sea of light. Charles was stunned on the spot. He looked at this brilliant brilliance of extinction, and the coldness of being slid on his back by a poisonous snake made him shudder. He didn't expect Tianchi, who had always been relatively restrained, to be this crazy. The prophet's words no longer need to be proven. Charles had already seen countless brilliant crosses erected on the corpses of the Earth. They were glorious and great, brilliant and terrifying. The white crosses that were thousands of meters high could also be clearly seen in space. He saw the white light from the lives on the Earth weaving into crosses bit by bit. The Apocalypse's human completion plan is about to begin. Charles, we don't have time. The prophet wrote. It's time for you to make a choice. Magneto looked at Charles and smiled. Charles looked straight at the dazzling white cross, ignoring his stinging eyes, and forced himself to stare at the shadow with 6 pairs of wings in the white light. Charles felt a burning sensation in his eyes, and he couldn't help but shed tears of pain. The intense light had destroyed his optic nerve. But the pain in his eyes was less than 1/10,000th of the pain in his heart. Apocalypse, you lied to me. Charles clenched his hands tightly and stared at the slightly dark shadow in the endless light. His eyes were damaged by the strong light, and his skin was damaged by radiation stimulation, but he still locked on the shadow in the white light with his blurred vision. I choose to resist. Charles enunciated each and every word firmly. He has put everything in the past behind him, feeling deceived and betrayed. There is deep regret in his heart. Now his only wish is to stop Apocalypse at all costs and by all means. I once chose to compromise. Apocalypse. Again and again. I made the choice I thought was right. In order to prevent the world from being harmed, they indulged in evil again and again. I maintain the fragile balance between you and this world. I have expectations for you again and again. But you always use facts to prove my failure and cowardice. Again and again. But now, Apocalypse, this time I will not indulge in your plot. You let me know that indulging in evil will only cause things to slide into the abyss. There will not be a next time, Apocalypse. I will stop you with my life. Charles's hair quickly turned white, dry, and gray, as if he had lost his life force. His hands, which were holding the armrest tightly, became dry and twisted, like an old man with one foot in the grave. Deep, dry wrinkles crawled over his face. This old man's body was filled with unimaginable power. In the blink of an eye, the body that was full of vitality became short and shriveled, as if the things that were full of life had been sucked away by something. Contrary to the rapid aging of his body, Charles's eyes showed unprecedented strength and firmness. His spiritual flame burned fiercely, like a dry and greasy torch. Such a strong will seemed to affect the real world. When the light passed in front of him, it seemed to be caught by something and disappeared without a trace. Charles's shadow became dark and deep. But the light in his eyes was stronger than ever. The light outlined a shallow outline next to his eyes, and then this outline stood up. He was like the shadow of the professor. It looked like Charles decades ago. With a powerful spiritual force binding the light, the professor who burned his life, his psychic power broke through the shackles and directly interfered with the real world. On the professor's slightly transparent body outlined by the light, there was a conspicuous X on the blue and yellow vest, which made Magneto feel very familiar. Old friend. It's like going back to the good old days. Magneto sighed. Strong electromagnetic waves swept through the stratosphere above the Earth, and with the help of the huge tide of solar radiation, Magneto set off an electromagnetic riot. Countless electromagnetic waves, radiation, and even light broke away from the huge tidal orbit between the Earth and the Sun, forming a storm vortex eye. Innumerable amounts of energy burst out. The tide of lightning and the violent radiation formed a huge plasma in the air. The release of energy up to several trillion pascals turned the huge surface that was hundreds of kilometers wide into a pot of thick porridge. The entangled matter states formed a semi-gelatinous fluid, tumbling in this narrow space. The professor and Magneto joined forces, and the electromagnetic storm quickly supplemented the professor's slightly illusory shadow, and the professor's psionic storm was gradually changing the nature of the electromagnetic storm. A more orderly energy fluctuation replaced chaos and disorder, and the electromagnetic seemed to have become a superconducting material for psychic power, able to react with psychic power. A bolt of lightning struck up from the ground. From the huge cross where Apocalypse is, an unspeakable force participated in the reaction of the psionic storm and the electromagnetic storm. A violent white light reaction appeared in the center of the storm, and then quickly divided into 4 colors: red, green, yellow, and blue. The force lightning from Chunong, with the special nature of the unified force, hit the core of the entanglement of the psionic storm and the electromagnetic storm. The unified energy field of the universe had an indescribable reaction with human mental power, deriving a special power that quickly infected the professor and Magneto. The powerful energy has unparalleled infectivity, and the matter infected by the energy has undergone incredible changes. The energy with the nature of radiation destroyed Charles and Magneto in the first place, and the blue and red light made the two spiritual bodies appear in a strange crystalline state. The prophet jumped in the river of time, choosing the most favorable influence factor for them. From the perspective of the prophet, any external factors that interfere with them are controlled to the best and most advantageous position, but to the prophet's despair, the apocalypse has already locked their end. The infinite causal functions of the future collapsed into one solution. Prophet, are you looking for me? Chen Ang's figure appeared at the end of the future, before the black end. He quietly watched the prophet as if waiting for a conversation from the past. What do you want to do? The prophet said in despair. You see. Chen Ong did not answer her, but watched Magneto and the professor who were infected by the power of the mind. The soul is a projection from a higher dimension, and the power of the mind is the key to the end of the soul. Have you ever seen a person who paints? He puts a pen on the paper, writes, and changes everything on that piece of white paper. And looking at it from the dimension of that piece of white paper, it is the self-change of that dimension. The consciousness of a lower dimension can never fully recognize the existence of a higher dimension. Our soul is like the shadow of the soul essence projected on a lower dimension. That kind of power from outside the dimension. It gives us the power to change the world. You know, only free will can change the world. The existence of the human soul is this kind of power. Human free will, with every additional choice, the future function has one more solution. This is the power to create the world, and it is also the power of the soul. And the easiest way to touch this power is the power of the mind, that is, the power of the mind. Chen Ong stared at the prophet, and an extremely complex puzzle appeared in the void. He gently put down the last piece of the puzzle and landed it in the only vacant position. Now, the last piece of the puzzle has been completed. The power of the mind obtained by the professor and Magneto, that is, the tree of life, the original substance representing the foundation, is finally completed. The power that originates from the human soul is also a power that will completely change them. Using the unified origin force of the universe as a spark, it ignites the electromagnetic force that represents matter and the spiritual force that represents the soul, creating a divine power that I have named psionic energy. Humans infected with psionic energy will lose their physical bodies. They will reshape their bodies with crystals. They will be a new race called the Proteus. With the psionic power of the mind as the cornerstone of light, the existence of the original substance representing the foundation of the tree of life, they are qualified to take Star Soul as the name of their race. Chen Ong looked at Magneto and the professor who were in a coma. He smiled and said, "The love-hate relationship between the dark archons and the light archons will continue until the end of the universe. The apes will replace the humans as the kingdom, then the Star Soul represents the foundation, the heaven of war represents the glory, the mutants of famine represent the victory, and the son of the sun Sephiroth represents the beauty. Genova the plague represents the power of God, the sea of mind represents mercy, and finally you, the prophet, represents understanding. Death represents wisdom, and I represent the crown. The 10 main substances, the path to the Kabbalah tree of life." Sephiroth turned into a huge shadow and entered the earth. His endless wings pierced into the void like huge tree root. War, famine, plague, and death gathered for the first time. Heaven was the carrier of materials, and together with the most perfect creature, the mutants of famine, they formed the most perfect. Genova the plague went deep into the core of his body and gave him the vitality of the entire planet. In the Garden of Eden of death, 2 great trees took root in the middle. The first was the tree of life that Sephiroth had incarnated, and the second was the tree of wisdom that Chen Ong had planted with the equation of wisdom. The soul that flowed out from the highest point of divinity, was degraded by the infection of death, fell from the highest substance bit by bit, and finally landed in the kingdom. Heaven and the mutants gave him a physical body, Genova gave him life, and the Garden of Eden of death dropped his soul. The soul that fell from a higher dimension was bound to the human body under the joint efforts of the four great messengers. The fruit at the highest point of the tree of life fell, and Chen Ong caught it. He looked at the existence that represented the highest secret of the soul. The first soul dimensionality reduction experiment is complete. Chen Ong looked at the fruit in his hand. The soul body that descended from a higher dimension is named Apocalypse. The fruit was like a baby stretching its body. Thy name is Apocalypse, the messenger that brings revelation to the world. War is thy warrior, famine is thy captive, plague is thy servant, and death is thy assistant. Thou shalt proclaim my name, so that only my name exists in the world. My Father in heaven, hallowed be the name of the Father, the kingdom of the Father come, may the will of the Father be done on earth. Like companions in heaven, my daily diet give me today, forgive my debts, just as I forgive people's debts. Don't let me meet temptation, save me from evil, for the kingdom, power, and glory are all the Father's for eternity. The earth was once again filled with flowers, and the trees were once again filled with fruit. Beside the Red Sea in Egypt, Moses raised his long staff, and the Red Sea parted. She stepped on the dry land under her feet, and led the Israelites behind her to the other side of the Red Sea. In her arms there was a fruit lying there quietly. You will build glory in Jerusalem, Apocalypse, because you are the only Son of God. He gave his name to you, and he shared his glory with you. In this world, you have revealed the wisdom of mankind. In the first era, you will be born as a virgin, and bring his glory to the world. 1. Chapter 141. After the rain, the road was muddy, mixed with broken grass, excrement, hair, and some oddly shaped objects that even Chen Ong could not identify. They had been stepped on and stirred into extremely oddly colored mud by people and horses. Standing on it, the smell of rotten vegetation, excrement, and blood made people want to stay as far away from this place as possible. When one stepped on it, the splashing of muddy water made people's eyelids twitch, and the air was always filled with a nauseating stench. No one wanted to come to the slums after the rain. The nobles pretended that this place didn't exist, and even their henchmen didn't want to come here. Although the slums were a hellish nightmare after the rain, it wasn't much better when it wasn't raining. Therefore, this place had become a place that even the tax officers avoided. These greedy shriveled bones would rather go to the dock area to collect the last copper NAR in a sailor's pocket than come here to search through the shabby shacks of these poor people. Everyone knew that they could only find some waste, garbage, or moldy, stinky food here. If they expected to find something valuable here, they might as well sweep the streets in the temple area. Maybe they could smelt some gold from the dust. When the goldsmiths next to the temple of the goddess of wealth smelted gold, there would often be gold dust blown into the streets by the wind. Of course, since such a good thing was discovered, this kind of good work was monopolized by the gangs. The people who worked here were the lowly people of the slums. But the gold they fished out from the acid made by the wizards could only be exchanged for some meager food from the gangs at a low price. Such places that the nobles looked down upon were often active places for gangs. They could get everything they needed here: cheap human lives and manpower, desperate people, murder, betrayal, theft, evil, and faith. The only thing they had to be wary of were the paladins who might go crazy at any time. Except for them, who would care about the evil happening in these forgotten corners? When Chen Ong put on the cloak, when he appeared here, the numb faces of the poor people on both sides of the road quickly made way for him. They all knew that people in cloaks were not to be trifled with, let alone this lord. Bloody Hand and Human Slayer were his nicknames. Although he had only been here for a few days, Chen Eng's ferocious name had already spread far and wide among the poor people of Deep Water City. Although he had heard of tyrants who committed all kinds of evil in distant countries, liches who manipulated corpses, and giant dragons who turned cities into ruins, these were too far away from the poor, so there was no mention of brutal bloody hands. It was more intimidating. The boss of the Yalan gang, who was entrenched here, was the best proof of His Excellency Bloody Hand's infamy. More than one eyewitness swore that they saw His Excellency Bloody Hand chopping the Yalan gang's boss into meat paste with a smile. But some others also swore that the Bloody Hand didn't do anything. Instead, they just smiled and let the original members of the Yalan gang mince Yalan into meat paste. No matter what the process was, the final result was the same. Yalan died without a complete corpse. In the original Yalan gang, some went crazy, while others became members of the Bloody Hand gang. They were loyal, firm, and would never betray the gang. Among the fighters behind Chen Ong, there were a few with bulging muscles, who had obviously been magically modified. Their eyes were lifeless, and the smell of blood on them could be smelled with the naked eye. Naturally, there was no telling whether it was their own or someone else's. It was no wonder that even Chen Ong had a smile on his face when he brought such a group of people through the street. He seemed to be easy to talk to, and no one dared to offend him. The reason why Chen Ong came here was because he had his own plans. The eyes of the gods won't leave the prime material world for a while. They have enough patience and time. On the continent, they also have considerable influence. And the major churches will be like bloodthirsty hounds in pursuit of my traces. Thinking of this, Chen Eng's eyes revealed a look of interest. He had long since stopped feeling emotional distress, unease, and nervousness because of such a small matter. Anger and fear were normal emotions for others, but they hadn't happened to him for a long time. The good news was that his mind had become stronger, but the bad news was that he was even less like a human. That was why he was curious about the gods. He was most interested in the knowledge of the gods in the multiverse, followed by arcane spells and magic. According to Chen Eng's style, he would definitely create some interesting things for this world, creating some waves in the calm and chaotic world. However, the laws of this universe limited this. In the macroscopic world, the laws of physics didn't seem to change much, but in the microscopic world, this universe overturned most of the laws that Chen Ong knew. The laws of this world were so strict and strange that Chen Ong had no choice but to study and experiment with most of his knowledge. The weave, spell slots, planes, and gods. This was a whole new system of the world. The seeds of danger grew in the darkness, and changes that were enough to shake the foundations of this world gradually took shape because of a visitor from another world. The restless gods watched the prime material world from the upper planes, and they felt the throne beneath them shake. "Boss!" The leader of the junkyard lowered his head in fear when he saw Chen Ong. This was the garbage dump of Deep Water City. The river that flowed through the city carried the garbage to the sea. The river that was designed by the scholar had a strong carrying capacity and rapid currents. Could transport both garbage and goods. It was of great importance to Deep Water City. This was also the Yalan gang, an important source of income for the Bloodhand gang. A few poor people in rags peeked at Chen Ong carefully. They stood in the chest-high river, using hooks and baskets to pick out the useful parts of the rubbish. A withered corpse floated down the river, and the eyes of the fisherman closest to it lit up. He hurriedly hooked it and tied it to his back. Corpses were also valuable here. Moreover, they were the most valuable things. Due to the Church of the King of the Dead, the liches and undead were in dire need of magic materials. As the god of death, Kalemver hated undead creatures to the core, so corpses that had undergone a death ceremony were especially difficult to be desecrated. It could be said that any undead creatures that had designs on these corpses would be hunted down by the Church of the Dead. Of course, even if they didn't do it, it would still be the same, but at least they wouldn't be noticed. Corpses abandoned in the river were worth a lot of money. A healthy adult male could be sold for a gold dural, while the corpses of children, the elderly, and the sick could be sold for 5 silver dirhams. The price of women was not fixed, and sometimes it was higher. Sometimes it was lower, and the mutilated and rotting corpses could only be sold at a low price. All corpses in the slums belonged to the Yalan gang, unless their relatives were willing to pay a priest to bury them. Even then, they had to endure the beatings and extortion from the gang, and each person had to pay a silver dirham for the dead. Colin. Chen Ong stared at the person in charge, causing him to kneel down in fear. Colin didn't know if Chen Ong was the kind of person who hated the desecration of corpses, but this wasn't something to be afraid of. What was scary was that he didn't know the new leader's personality and temper. If Chen Ong was a follower of Kalemver, then he was finished. Under normal circumstances, the leader wouldn't kill his subordinates, but there were 2 exceptions. First, he was the new leader, and hadn't established a bloody reputation yet. He had to protect his brutal reputation. Second, he didn't care. Unfortunately, Chen Ong was in both situations. Fortunately, Chen Ong didn't trust anyone. Colin was forgiven. "You've done well." Chen Eng's praise made Colin heave a sigh of relief. "But there's no doubt that you can do better. You have to work hard, and it's the same for the goods you sell. Even a lich has needs. Our customers' needs are our needs. We have to worry about our customers' needs, and in order to provide better necromancy materials, we have to improve the quality of our goods. Low-grade materials like corpses aren't worth much. How much can you earn from a corpse? Mages don't lack money, but they lack time. We have to sell their time for our own money." Chen Ong stood up as he spoke. He gestured. "Faced with a corpse like this, we have to continuously break down the components that make up the value of the corpse. We have to find all the components that create value. The heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and skull have to be specific. We have to delve deeper into necromancy materials, and strive to provide materials that are at the standard of spellcasting materials. We have to actively contact our customers and find out what they need. Do they want a fresh corpse or a rotten one? Do they want a large skeleton or a small skeleton? Do they want organs? Can they accept dried organs? Quality materials need to be analyzed in detail. For example, the bones of a youth are the most valuable, but the organs of a youth aren't bad either. Not only do we have to provide standard materials, we also have to provide special materials. Corpses of mercenaries, corpses of virgin girls, corpses filled with hatred, corpses of murdered people, murder weapons, hair, and the blood of the dead. We have to develop these materials that have been overlooked. This is the foundation for the growth and prosperity of the gang." Cole was a gloomy young man. At this moment, he was staring at his new boss, his eyes filled with shock and admiration. Under the evil detection, he was already an extremely evil person. How would Chen Ong, who was even crueler and more evil than him, behave? It should be evil so thick that it was almost black. Cole, evil is not the goal, but the result. Chen Ong seemed to have seen through his thoughts. He smiled and said, "Think about your goal, Cole. You don't do these things for fun, excitement, and fun. Those people are crazy. You are a normal person. These are just jobs. Jobs that earn you money. Jobs that allow you to enjoy yourself. There is no difference in survival. It has nothing to do with justice or evil. You just want to live a better life, right?" The smile on Chen Eng's face made Cole feel a bone-chilling fear. He quickly nodded in agreement, afraid that a huge axe would fall on his head. "You're very smart, Cole. Welcome to our family." Chen Ong smiled. "I don't care about your beliefs and standpoint. But pure evil makes people feel helpless, right? No one likes to live with lunatics. Those who are obsessed with murder, abuse, and betrayal don't seem to like this world. They're so obsessed with death. That's why they were sent to see Sirik and Bane." Cole thought about the origin of Chen Eng's reputation as the Bloody Hand. This was a name that was dyed red with the blood of the most terrifying and crazy people in the slums. the skinners, the decapitators, the bloody skulls, the black hands, and the ravens. He was crueler than a cruel ninja, more tyrannical than a tyrannical person, and more evil than an evil person. This was the bloody hand that everyone feared. He was a serious, evil, and creative boss that everyone feared and obeyed. "Business is business, Cole." Cole hurriedly replied, "Business is business, boss. I understand. I'll send Sirik's statue out later." Cole thought to himself, "I shouldn't have learned those teachings before. I'm crazy to be obsessed with those things. Gold dirals are our faith. Talk to the scattered forest tower and the kingdom of the dead. Ask them to provide us with magical materials or equipment for preserving corpses." Chen Ong gestured for Cole to take note of his words. But Cole was in a difficult position. The existence of magic on the continent was very expensive. "Don't worry, Cole. Tell them that this is to provide them with better materials. Ask them to pay with materials. Is that the bottom line? Just 80 healthy male corpses will do." Chen Ong smiled. This way there was a chance that this deal would succeed. However, they didn't have that many goods on hand. Cole looked up in confusion. He saw Chen Ong looking in the direction of Waterdeep City. There were far more than 80 members of the Thieves' Guild and gangs there. Chapter 142. Darkness was the perfect lover of slaughter. The world of thieves was filled with betrayal, deceit, and bloodshed. The world of the dark side had its own ancient and obscure laws. Every wanderer and sneaky person in the shadows unconsciously obeyed these laws, fulfilling their ancient agreement with the darkness. If you have read this chapter, please go to murder, betrayal, and deceit, tyranny, hatred, and evil, just like what Bane and Sirik had blessed. This was where their godhood was, and the ancient origin of the laws of this world. According to this tradition, Chen Ong would have to face a series of conspiracies and tests from the dark forces. He also needed to use cruelty, tyranny, and terror to maintain his dignity, and deter anyone who dared to extend their claws into his territory. In this process, the murder, betrayal, madness, and tyranny would greatly please the evil gods. This ritualistic tradition would greatly compete for the power of darkness. Anyone who tried to challenge this tradition would encounter an even deeper temptation from the darkness. But Chen Ong did not care. He did not have the time, energy, or interest to play these ancient games with them. Thus, he decided to use an even more ancient dark tradition to deal with the upcoming crisis. This tradition was called, "The one with the biggest fist is the boss." It was also known as violence to solve all problems. This included conspiracies, opposition, possible traitors, petty conspiracies, and endless small troubles. If killing could not solve the problem, then it must be because there was not enough killing. Of course, violence could not solve the problem, but at least it could solve most of the problems. This was the logic of darkness. The strong were king, and it was an ancient and deeply rooted tradition. Whether it was in the light or the dark, Faerun or Greyhawk, Earth or Toriel, this logic was valid in most situations. With such a continuous and effective strategy, Chen Ong had no reason not to use it. Under the shadow of dusk, Chen Ong smiled as he stood in the darkness, gazing at Deep Water City. Behind him, a few black shadows gradually became blurry under the hazy twilight. Under the hazy twilight, there was suddenly a trace of coldness. Deepwater City lived up to its name. It had the best deepwater port in the entire southern half-bay. In fact, this was where the name of Deepwater City came from. This was the largest cargo port in the south. The merchants here offered generous offerings to Umberlee and Talos, not to pray for their protection, but to avoid the wrath of the gods. In this prosperous city, money brought evil. In fact, this place was surrounded by good forces. However, the power of evil was even stronger. Many paladins saw this evil city as a thorn in their side, but because of the delicate political situation and the economic status of Deepwater City, they were powerless. The kindness that protected order was nothing but a joke when faced with the evil of order itself. In this aspect, they couldn't even compare to the idiots of chaos and kindness. The dock area was the source of Deep Water City's wealth. Over the past 200 years, the wealth that flowed here had grown to a level comparable to the 30 red dragons. Of course, he definitely wasn't some freak with an ancient Roman name. Instead, he was a standard adult red dragon that liked shiny things and had the same sense of beauty as the dwarves. So there was a thief here. The only thing that drove them wasn't faith or faction, but money. One of the strongest existences in the entire world, the supreme god of the universe, great god Mani. The entire material plane, more than 60% of intelligent creatures were his devout believers. He exercised his supreme divine power through his shiny divine power. Chen Ong thought that Sirik and Bane's evil faith was too unstylish. Violence and murder were always means to achieve an end, not the end itself. Evil for the sake of evil, murder for the sake of murder, tyranny for the sake of tyranny. It sounded stupid. Only great god Mani could be the most loyal faith of the rogues and darkness. He had never let his believers down in the multiverse and the other worlds. With just a little bit of Mani's power, Chen Ong successfully obtained the information he wanted. Of course, this was also related to the few bloody corpses in the tavern. 8 deliverable goods were in his hands. Rogues like to hide in narrow and complicated terrains. Unfortunately, Chen Ong also liked it, because the pure steel crossbow he made could only unleash its terrifying destructive power within 50 feet. If the composite material did not reach 5,000 pounds, it would be a shame to the technological civilization. Even so, those cautious, rat-like rogues were really troublesome. They didn't have a fixed stronghold and didn't seem to have much influence. However, without controlling them, it would never be possible to control the underground world. In this way, it would be meaningless to deal with the Thieves' Guild in Deepwater City. In order not to disturb these little rats, who were extremely sensitive to the slightest movement, Chen Eng's actions must be ruthless, fast, accurate, and stable. With a straightforward speed, he would make the Thieves' Guild history. No rogue could be underestimated. They were cautious and meticulous. In long-term training, their senses were sharp and their intuition was strong. They could hardly be ambushed and attacked. Every rogue was extremely careful, even somewhat neurotic and sick. However, a rogue who lost this characteristic would soon disappear in this cruel world. It wasn't difficult to kill a rogue. Even a cautious fox couldn't beat a good hunter, but it was extremely difficult to completely annihilate a rogue organization. Moreover, it was an ancient behemoth like the Thieves' Guild. Even a branch was not easy to deal with. To achieve this, the most important condition was information. Population is a valuable asset. Chen Ong stood on the tallest sentry tower in the slums and pointed at the endless rows of shacks below. This place used to be a lighthouse near the harbor. Ever since the merchants who came and went to the slums and built the forward camp, eradicating the evil creatures that occupied the most advantageous terrain and building Deepwater City, this place had been abandoned. However, it was still the tallest building in the slums. It was also an important stronghold of the original Yalan gang. Wealth and value can't be created out of thin air. We need these. Chen Ong pointed to the numb slums below and pointed to the craftsman area near the dock area in the distance, and these. Only by combining tools and population can we create wealth for us. Chen Ong indicated. In front of him, several backbone members of the Bloody Hand Gang were thoughtful. They were all selected by Chen Ong. In Chen Eng's opinion, they weren't so stupid. So, I need you to create wealth more efficiently and control the population. But what should we do? Make use of the lowly slums here to build workshops? Lek, the accountant of the Bloody Hand Gang, was puzzled. The people here are too stupid. They don't have noble blood, so they can't take on jobs with higher intelligence. They can't learn craftsmanship, and they can't read. I know. Chen said slowly. He looked at the seemingly human people curled up indifferently on the roadside. These people had been struggling on the edge of survival for generations. Their intelligence and ability had deteriorated to an extremely dangerous level. Compared to the aristocrats with excellent heredity, their intelligence was almost like that of two different species. But every dog has its value. You just lack the eyes to find them. To make them create value, you need to let them see hope. Chen said seriously. Hope? Lek and his classmates chewed on this strange word, feeling that Mr. Bloody Hand in front of them. They felt that the bloody hand in front of them looked like the priests of the good gods who were trying to preach in the slums. Yes, hope is a good thing. It can make the lazy become diligent, the ignorant become shrewd, and the numb and lifeless become hard-working and passionate. Chen smiled, but in Lek's eyes, he looked like a demon. Give them a little bit of cheap hope in exchange for their independence and hard work. Creating wealth and value for us is a fair business, isn't it? What a precious thing hope is! It's very fair to exchange freedom and money for it. Lek heard Chen low voice. Because of the darkness contained in it, he shivered. He no longer dared to doubt the evil and horror of his boss. His boss could come up with such an idea, which was like a devil's contract. Was his boss really not a superior devil incarnated from hell to the human world? They need a role model, a person who can rely on their own efforts and struggle. A kindred person who can change their fate. We need to let them believe that through their own efforts and struggle, they can get rid of this fate, a very certain hope. Not because of luck. Not because of other factors, but because of their own efforts and success. Chen asked in a low voice, Do you understand what I mean? But Lek was a little hesitant. Encouraged by Chen he dared to question, There is no such person. This kind of person can't exist. Then let's create one. Chen replied without hesitation. Even if it's a deception, it's for their own good. Find out those who are likely to succeed. Give them a little help, so that they can achieve those results that are impossible to achieve. It's not difficult. As long as we loosen the rope that strangles their necks a little and let them breathe a sigh of relief, they can do such a thing. But they won't believe it. No, they will. People in deep despair would crazily believe in an illusory dream. They would force themselves to believe in it, because no matter how bad the hope was, it was still better than nothing. It was not a bad thing to let them believe in it and obtain that little bit of pitiful comfort. Nothing is more terrible than the present, isn't it? But it will soon be revealed. When we harvest our wealth from them, they will find that they have nothing again. They will continue to live like salted fish, and they will hate us even more. Lek took out the courage of his life and questioned Chen. It won't be revealed. Chen said, We have to change the way. If we kill the lambs, they will desperately resist, but if we harvest their milk and wool, they will endure it. Be careful with your lambs. Let's change the way. The poor have no identity. They are not the lambs of the Lord, nor are they the free people of the city. They have no one to rely on, and no one will accept them. This means that they can only be under our control. It's easy to choose a channel and harvest their wealth, our wool and milk. Chen continued to smile. There are many ways. We can give them loans, and we can open banks for them to deposit money. Of course, these are difficult to operate and not suitable for us. In places where we can directly control, we have the decisive thing, the land. The land here is ours. We buy the land here at a low price, and then hire the cheap people here to build the land. Finally, we will build the houses and sell them at an amazing price, and harvest the wealth of those people. They have no other choice, right? And they won't complain. Because this is business, and business is business. Facing the gang's backbone, who looked at him dumbfounded and even a little afraid of him, Chen-Ang's face was calm. This is a long-term plan. Now we have some more convenient ways to harvest our wealth. Chen-Ang led the group back to the tower. Inside was a small greenhouse, which was taken care of by a low-level druid. There were clumps of inconspicuous herbs growing in the greenhouse. The most eye-catching part of those plants were the long and thin leaves with lanceolate lobes. They were palm-shaped and had a dark green surface. The young leaves on the back had white hairs, and the adult leaves were hairless. The edges of the adult leaves were curved inwardly. This was a special product of earth, a kind of tobacco that the Dutch people loved to see. It was a modified version from another world, and it guaranteed that the taste wouldn't change. It could refresh the mind, raise the spirit, and make people high. At the same time, it reduced the toxicity of the tobacco. It was not a problem to quit a dozen times a day. A social organization that did not sell tobacco was not a dynamic social organization. With this special product as a lubricant, Chen Ang's organization began to grow vigorously. Tobacco, which was sold in the name of magic materials, provided the Bloody Hand Gang with a large amount of money, which made people jealous. If money alone was not enough to cause a violent reaction in the underworld, then a new species and product with huge profits was enough to cause the greed of the entire underworld. This was a greedy trap. Chapter 143. In the laboratory under the watchtower, a green-skinned goblin was tied to the test bench. It looked at Chen Ong in fear, its mind trembling almost crazily. It struggled and wailed as the magical vessel in Chen Ang's hand emitted a wonderful brilliance. In its chaotic brain, the fear it had for Chen Ong could already be said to be carved into its bones. The painful memories of this little creature without intelligence had engraved fear and nightmares in its weak soul. "Master! Master, don't! Master!" The goblin trembled all over and screamed a few clear words in the common language. This behavior had exceeded 99% of its kind and reached the unique level among the goblins. One had to know that whether goblins were intelligent creatures or not, the mages had a dispute that lasted for 2 eras. However, a miracle happened here. A wild gnome, under extreme fear, displayed the performance of an intelligent creature. It used facts to prove that under extreme fear, any creature had the ability to stimulate the potential of intelligence. Pseudopropylamine extract solution, goblin sample, 12th test. Chen Ong said indifferently. There was a pure blue powder in his hand, flashing with magic. The cold and pure color seemed to calm people down completely. Ephedrine extracted from plants, changed its nature through alchemy, and produced this arcane version of the cold poison potion. No matter how the goblin struggled and begged, Chen Ong still firmly injected the potion into its blood vessels. As the blue potion spread, the struggling goblin gradually calmed down. Its pupils began to dilate slightly, its heartbeat went from rapid to steady, and its ferocious face became calm, even calm and detached. Chen Ong let go of the goblin and opened its crumbling eyelids. He watched the goblin's eyes turn from lax to extremely focused. Rationality, calmness, and even wisdom were revealed. The goblin deftly untied the iron chain on its left hand, which surprised Chen Ong. Although Chen Ong had specifically used a lock with a relatively simple structure, this kind of fine steel lock would take a lot of effort. Even an official rogue would have to spend some effort to unlock this kind of fine steel lock. "Master! 9527 reporting for duty." The goblin respectfully prostrated at Chen Ang's feet. 9527 was its serial number, and Chen Ong had also read it in front of them. Of course, it was in a chaotic and extremely noisy environment. Surprisingly, 9527 immediately recalled it. This was something that most humans could not do, which meant that the goblin's intelligence had reached at least 12 points at this moment. Pseudopropylamine performed well in human trials. Putting aside its magical effect on Earth, in this world, this kind of deoxymetahydride had the same magical effect as a magic potion. It had an extremely good effect in spellcasting, concentration checks, and skill check. It was equivalent to a weakened version of Fox's cunning. It even had a strong effect on mages' meditation and spellcasting. In this world, it was a very effective potion that was widely welcomed by spellcasters and nobles. Of course, this was also a demonic potion that could give the user intelligence and comprehension abilities. Even with the increased efficiency of contact with the magic net, far more than those expensive spices, if taken in a short period of time, the hidden effects would not be very obvious. But the benefits it brought to the user would be returned 1,000 times, 10,000 times. Just like the devil's promise, it was beautiful and full of temptation on the surface, but in reality, it was extremely evil. So the full name of this potion was the Devil's Ice Temptation. This was not the most powerful thing about this potion. Its most terrifying ability was to increase the efficiency of spellcasters' meditation. This ability could even be given to suspected intelligent creatures such as goblins, kobolds, and ogres during the effective period of the potion. The possibility of becoming a mage. Not a warlock, not a priest, but a mage famous for wisdom and knowledge. But, as its name suggested, this ability was also the devil's promise. It looked beautiful, but in reality, it was an even more terrible trap. To exert this magical effect, it needed 12 times the amount of normal human beings. In other words, one-time addiction. Mages who took the ice poison had to undergo a DC of 14 will check every day. And every time they took the potion, they would receive a +1 bonus. If they failed the will check and refused to continue taking the ice poison, the mage would fall into a state of paralysis, poison, helplessness, attribute decrease, disease, fear, loss of will, panic, and dizziness. There were more than 9 negative states in total, and the degree of the negative state would increase with the increase in the will check. Mages who passed the will check would be affected by the 9 negative states, half the normal value of the check. Mages who failed the will check would have to take more ice poison to maintain normal mental state and cast spells. Such mages were called magic addicts. After taking the ice poison every day, the magic addicts would gain spell slot. After the will check of the magic addicts exceeded 50, their casting ability would be related to the ice poison. After taking more than 5 times the daily dose of ice poison, the mage would be able to reset all their spell slots. Taking the ice poison repeatedly would restore the corresponding number of spell slots according to the dosage and body size. Chen Ong was still trying to figure out the special ability of the magic addicts, but its ability to control mages and evil creatures was unique. This evil method helped Chen Ong gather an evil army of more than 1,000 people 2 weeks after he started experimenting with the potion. Although most of the members were gnomes, there was no lack of strong races such as gnolls and ogres. The number of spellcasters in the army was astonishing. There were more than 50 low-level spellcasters, most of which were magic addicts. Of course, they were still increasing and being eliminated at a very fast rate. On average, for every 5 magic addicts, there would be 1 original magic addict who could not keep up with the speed of Chen Ang's potion supply in the will check. The magic addicts were crazy and tyrannical. They would indiscriminately attack all creatures that came into their sight, but Chen Ong could control and drive them through the ice poison. In addition to the ice poison, Chen Ong had also developed the blood of madness, based on Anfi's life, and the water of passion, based on Guaka's. The magic addicts and the magic addicts' army grew rapidly in the abandoned mines outside of Deepwater City. In Deepwater City, from the port area to the noble area, there was an undercurrent surging. Because of the popularity of a certain kind of tobacco, the entire underground world of Deepwater City had set their eyes on the unknown Bloody Hand Gang. The entire port area was in an uproar because of this magical spice. A soundless and sinister undercurrent was surging towards the Bloody Hand Gang. All the forces were drooling over this fat piece of meat. The only reason they could still control their temper was because the Union of Thieves, the uncrowned king of the underground forces in Deepwater City, was calm. Everyone knew that. This was an oath to their sphere of influence. Of course, it was not to protect the Bloody Hand Gang, but to declare, This prey is in my territory. Master. 9527 stood up from the ground. There was already a faint fluctuation of the magic net on its body. Chernong was very interested in this mutated gnome. Gnomes were the only species that could have a blood reaction with these special drugs. 9527's performance in intelligence had far exceeded that of its own kind. The magically modified version of the pseudopropyl ammonia extract was on the body of the gnome. It had an irreversible transformation effect. According to Chernong's dissection, the brain of the gnome was only the size of a walnut. Even if 9527 was mutated, it was only the size of a fist. However, the structure of their brain was extremely special. The folds of the brain were several orders of magnitude higher than that of humans. It was as if the shape of the mucosal folds of the small intestine was placed in the brain. In their brains, there were even traces of high intelligence in the atrophied part. In Chernong's view, the structure and molecules were very similar to the biological computer developed by China in the X-Men world. This meant that the gnomes might have come from a fallen advanced civilization. An advanced technological civilization that could be loaded with biological computing chip. Because of Chernong's abuse of the drugs, the gnomes had awakened their once high intelligence by an extremely coincidental reason. It was also because of the side effects of the drugs that their brains had to specifically create a gland to secrete alkaline toxins. Now 9527 was only an isolated case, but Chernong would soon discover this and spread this mutation. It was foreseeable that there would be a place for these demon-addicted gnomes on the stage of the Faerun continent in the future. 9527, according to the laboratory regulations, you will be given limited freedom. You will have limited freedom. You can now leave storage room number 1 and enter containment room number 3. Chernong said calmly as he continued to analyze the data of the drug experiment. Yes, Master. The great ruler of evil, the lord of demon addiction, the shadow of nightmares and the monarch of poison. 9527 piously kissed the ground at Chernong's feet. I will be your loyal servant. Practitioner of evil, your will is the driving force for our survival. Your command is our only mission. 9527 bowed his head in awe. His fear and reverence for Chernong had been deeply engraved in his soul. Because of the rule of law, Chernong would have unquestionable dominion over them and obtain their devout faith. Of course, the gods they believed in were the lord of demon addiction and the monarch of poison. If Chernong continued to develop the path of demon addiction, there would be a place for him in the abyss. The abyss would no doubt favor this demon monarch, and his demon addiction legion would shake the entire multiverse. In fact, the force of evil in the multiverse had already favored Chernong. The will of the abyss longed for his fall, and his soul would be the darling of the entire abyss. Passing by the material room, 9527 stared at the dull and numb eyes of his kind. He watched as they crazily rushed into the gap between the railings because they smelled the frost poison, stretching their short green hands out of the railings and grabbing at 9527 in a frenzy. The drooling, red-eyed, crazed ones of their kind. The only thing they could do was to use various languages: the common tongue, dwarven tongue, elven tongue, and giant tongue. 9527 even heard a spellcaster goblin shouting the same sentence in the draconic tongue that was full of elemental power. Give me the medicine! Give me the medicine! Master, give me our master! Give me! 9527 stood in front of them with a cruel smile. It said hoarsely, "You reptiles are not worthy to be my kind. Only under the will of Master are there my kind. Goblins are noble, the kin of Master and the blessing of evil. We are evil and powerful, and we unite under one banner to carry out the great will of Master. Praise Master! Praise demon addiction! Praise evil!" 9527 felt a powerful energy surging in its body. Its skin turned red, and it sprayed a thick alkali poison from its mouth. The dark blue poisonous mist drifted into the goblins, making them frantically agitated. "Medicine, medicine, check it out!" The goblins sucked in the dark blue poisonous mist in the air obsessively. They looked at 9527 standing behind the railing excitedly and forced the arm-thick iron railing open. They were fearless and powerful, as if they were superimposed with 5 layers of bloodlust. They swarmed around 9527 in a frenzy, becoming its most chaotic and frenzied army. The goblins did not know pain, and their minds were clear but crazy. Their combat power was not inferior to the average army. Goblins in a completely berserk state were resistant to most charm spells. They were the cheapest and most cost-effective army. If they were equipped with good equipment, their combat power would not be inferior to the average elite army. Demon addiction spellcasters, demon addiction warlocks, demon addiction druids, and demon addiction priests. When the spellcasters grew up, this army might be able to shine in the Faerun continent. Chen-Ong glanced at the goblins kneeling at 9527's feet, and turned back to the experiment. 9527 led the goblins and knelt at his feet. The goblins cried out in fear and excitement, "Master, Master! The great lord of demon addiction, the poison monarch, the blessing of evil! I obey your guidance, learn your teachings, and carry out your path and your will. This is the only purpose of our existence. Go, bring more of your people back. Build your own workshops in the mines, cultivate more demon addiction spellcasters, and conquer more evil creatures for me, 9527. I order you to be their commander. Build an elite army for me, and completely rule the evil kingdom of the wilderness. Learn the civilization of intelligent creatures, create your own civilization, and develop your own power." Chapter 144. Politics was a complicated game. In Waterdeep City, no one was the master of this city. Even the nobles who ruled here had to compromise and compromise when facing the evil forces of the underground world. No one could do things without worry, unless they wanted to be everyone's enemy. Conflict and compromise were the essence of this game. When the Bloodhand Gang's special tobacco rapidly spread in this port city, these big shots had acutely smelled the scent of profit and blood. This cheap and practical magic material had absorbed a large number of gold dirhams in a very short period of time. It could be said to be a shocking amount of wealth. More than 500 pounds of goods were digested without a trace in the market. If it was any other place, it might not be so smooth, but Waterdeep City was different. It was the shipping hub of the entire South. Every day, a huge amount of goods came from all directions. Merchant ships from all walks of life transshipped their goods and replenished their supplies here. Every merchant was eager to fill their cabins and return to their hometowns with riches. Faerun had hallucinogenic plants. Blue magic powder was a popular casting material for mages. Not only could it bring a sense of euphoria and hallucinations, but it could also temporarily increase intelligence and charm. Even the side effects were extremely mild. The only downside was that it was expensive. Damn expensive, damn expensive! Items that inherited the arcane magic did not have the most expensive ones, only the more expensive ones. This kind of rare magic material, its price could make a low-level mage go bankrupt, and if one became addicted to blue magic, it could make a king want to sell his own crown. Other than that, there were also hallucinogenic potions, such as pain water and Mordin tea. However, none of them were as cheap as the special tobacco. The price was simply unbelievably low. 1 gold dirham could buy a pound of it and smoke it to one's heart's content. This plant did not have any special environmental requirements or strict cultivation conditions. A low-ranked druid could plant a large area of it. It was simply an important economic crop for a strong country and its people. It didn't even need 20 years. On every piece of land on the Faerun continent, anyone with a little bit of money could lie on their own bed and smoke. They could enjoy this cheap happiness. It could create countless economic benefits. It would become the most important spice for sea routes. Yes, this cheap and harmless tobacco was seen by many as a spice gifted by the gods. Even the priests of the Order God, who were most hostile to hallucinogenic items, had to admit the harm that this kind of tobacco did to the body was not worth mentioning. Compared to the other dangers on the Faerun continent, this was just a little bit of addiction. Quitting 8 to 10 times a day would suffice. It was as gentle as the comfort of the gods. Many priests of the Chaos Gods had already used this spice in their rituals, like the Lady of Joy, and its effects were widely praised. Some of the good gods of chaos even encouraged their believers to accept these things in order to strengthen the spiritual connection between the believers and the god. In fact, they were the first to order this special tobacco. Most of them were from the major shrines. They would use these things in their gatherings and prayer ceremonies. Some priests would even use them in their private prayers in order to become one with God and feel the way of God. Chen Ong expressed his admiration for these masters of psychology who were proficient in self-hypnosis and hypnosis. With this special perfume, the efficiency of their self-hypnosis was effectively improved. One could not help but sigh with emotion. Since ancient times, drugs were paired with charlatans. He quickly launched a special version of the special spices, using more complicated and cumbersome formulas and more gorgeous packaging to ruthlessly slaughter this group of fat sheep. For the past few days, every morning Deepwater City would wake up in the clouds. In the noble district, the extravagant nobles had already started to burn these spices in their mansions. It made them feel like they were in a dream, intoxicated and floating. Such a flourishing scene amazed every merchant who came to Deepwater City. It really is a city of dreams. Those who knew the situation exclaimed. It really is a city of sin. Chen Ong said expressionlessly as he looked at the city shrouded in smoke. Not everything in this world was within his expectations, just like how he would never have thought that the Faerun continent would praise this special medicine. Druids were happy for it. Mages treated it like a treasure, even the gods blessed it. Dwarves loved it and mixed it with tobacco in the mines. Elves loved it and emptied their illusions in meditation. When Chen Ong saw the streets and alleys where the special tobacco was being openly traded, his underlings ran around like merchants, bargaining for the price. He saw the people in the slums smiling happily, sweeping away their previous numbness and decadence. They planted tobacco on every piece of land that could be planted, and hung it in front of and behind their houses. He saw the children in the slums using coarse wooden boxes to store dried tobacco leaves, scurrying around the streets and alleys, avoiding the tax officials and selling tobacco to the whole city. He saw the youths in the slums scrambling to join the bloody hand gang that they were originally afraid of. In order to protect their own tobacco leaves, they fought against the rival gangs with all their might. Chen Ong had to admit that he had greatly underestimated the evil and depravity of Faerun. Although the process was a little strange and twisted, Chen Ong finally achieved his goal. The villains of the Bloody Hand Gang still walked in the streets and alleys with daggers and poisons, but they no longer hid in the shadows and did sneaky things. Instead, they openly went in and out of the commercial places in Deepwater City, and confronted the merchants with obscure languages. The new force led by Lek dressed like a gentleman, and behaved like a noble. They imitated the feeling that Chen Ong brought them. The new force in the slums also received the most rigorous training in the harsh environment. They would be familiar with their daggers like they were with their lovers. A big controllable net spread out from the slums little by little, and the end of this big net was held in Chen Ang's hand, bringing him power and threat. The whole city is watching and waiting, like wolves peeping at lambs. They are hostile to each other and wary of each other, reaching a fragile and temporary balance. Soon, these predators will pounce on us, who have great benefits. Lek looked serious. He held the warnings he had received from different sources in his hands. Then they will find out who the wolves are. Chen Ong smiled, and he turned the ring on his right index finger, which symbolized power and token. "Many people are waiting for our response. Your Excellency." Lek couldn't help saying, "It's not that no one is on our side. The enemies of the Thieves' Guild, and some other organizations hope to reach a certain range of cooperation with us." "What are they expecting?" Chernong asked with a smile. "This world is complicated, and there are mutual checks and balances. Every giant has enough constraints around it, because the world is balanced, and there must be an equal weight on the other side of the chip. Every existence has its own elements of checks and balances. That's politics. Through this game, we can take advantage of this balance. Like a goblin stepping between two giants, we keep balance and stability, sell most of the benefits, and protect the part that we can eat. Then, you will struggle in the coming storm and wave. You will use all your skills and pay any price to survive. Then the organization will be stable and strong." Chen Ong spread out his hands and looked into Lek's eyes. "Yes, Your Excellency. This is the price we must endure and pay." Lek summoned up his courage, bit his lower lip, and said. Chen Ong showed a playful smile, and looked at him quietly with eyes that Lek couldn't figure out. There was only the sound of Chen Ong knocking on the walnut table, which was very obvious in the quiet room. In this suffocating silence, Lek's mind was blank, and he had to focus on his pulse, feeling the strong beat again and again. Once, twice, 3 times a long sigh came to his ears, like a bottomless tearing sound. The fear in Lek's heart controlled him uncontrollably, and he almost collapsed to the ground. After the sigh, it was Chen Ang's calm voice. Lek, what makes you think that I am a person who needs to endure? Is it my usual tolerance and low-key style, or my too-kind style? Or is it those provocations, and those rumors that affect your judgment?" A steady and powerful hand rested on his shoulder. Chen Ong gently pushed open the back door of the secret chamber, and took Lek along the long passage. Soon, a blazing red river appeared in front of Lek. Above the river of lava, a muscular ogre raised a large hammer and struck the steel plate in his hand. A circular axe that was the size of a human head was starting to take shape. In the lava river, goblins and kobolds pushed the ore into the blazing fire, and the molten steel was collected along the conduit into a huge blast furnace. Lek watched as a furnace of pure molten steel was poured out. Huge steel ingots were crushed by a hydraulic press hundreds of feet high like dough. The steel plate was rolled out by a heavy hammer, and the huge machine drove hundreds of thousands of pounds of casting head to hit the steel plate. Hard plate armor was cast as a whole, and sophisticated weapons were piled up in the corner as if they were free. Tens of thousands of gnomes injected unknown black potions into their bodies under the urging of gnomes who were spewing blue smoke. Armor with burrs and mat edges were strapped on their bodies. In the distance, a mixed army of ogres and hound-head men raised all sorts of pure steel weapons, and a brutal aura wreaked havoc in the smelting factory. Lek held his breath. He stared nervously at the orderly but crazy evil army in the field. He even forgot that he came in above board, and instinctively hid in a corner that brought him a sense of security.